name is Sonia Chang Diaz, and I'm going to call this public hearing of the Foundation Budget Review Commission officially to order. As I said, again, my name is Sonia Chang Diaz. I'm Senate Chair of the Education Committee and co-chair of this commission, which was established in the FY15 budget this past spring. Before we begin, I guess not before we begin, as we begin, I want to first thank the local officials in Bolton here and the administrators of the Neshoba Regional School District, in particular one of our very own commission members, Michael Wood, for hosting today's hearing. I also want to take this opportunity to recognize the other members of the commission who are present. To my left, we have co-chair or newly reappointed, also co-chair of the Education Committee in the Legislature, Alice Peich. And I'm just going to ask the commissioners if we can start with Representative Ferguson down on the left. If you can just introduce yourselves.
Is this all right? Everyone can hear me fine that way? Representative Kim Ferguson, the 1st Worcester District, and member of the Education Committee, as well as the Minority Leaders appointee to the Commission.
David Bertolino, Executive Director for the Mass Association of School Business Officials, MASBO, and a 19-year business manager with Medway.
Michael Wood, Superintendent of Schools for Neshoba Regional School District. Welcome. And I'm sitting here representing the Mass Association of Regional School Districts.
John LaFlash, Superintendent of Southern Worcester County Regional Vocational School District, representing the Mass Association of Vocational Administrators.
John Coleman Wallace, representing the American Federation of Teachers.
And Joe Esposito, representing the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education.
Wonderful, thank you. The Foundation Budget Review Commission is charged with reviewing the way that foundation budgets are calculated and making recommendations for potential changes in these calculations. To inform its deliberations, the commission is holding 6 public hearings, I think this is the 5th, to inform our deliberations. We're holding these hearings across the state in order to gather input from members of the public. In particular, the Commission is seeking public testimony that would address one or more of the topics that the Commission is charged with examining, which are listed on the handout that hopefully has been made available to you all when you came in. We respectfully ask that you limit your testimony to 3 minutes and remain focused on these specific charges that we are in turn charged with making recommendations on. Again, we want to make time to hear from everyone today, so we're going to be keeping the timer here with the 3-minute clock, and just ask you to be mindful of it. And as a reminder, written testimony is also accepted and reviewed by the commissioner, so if you have a copy of that, or if there's more than you can fit into your 3 minutes, please feel encouraged to provide the commission staff here with copies of written testimony. We will also, in deference to legislators, take them at a turn. I see that we're lucky to have a few here with us today, although they've duly shown up in advance and signed up, as with anyone else. Lastly, we ask that you please turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate so that there won't be noise disrupting the hearing. And then we just want to note for folks' reference or for folks' knowledge that the hearing is being video recorded. So with that, we will begin the hearing with our first person to testify, and I believe Senator Eldridge, should you wish to testify?
Great. Well, good morning, and I want to thank Chairwoman Chang Diaz and Chairwoman Peich and all the members of the Foundation Budget Review Commission for holding this hearing in Bolton, especially for rescheduling it. I know it was canceled due to the snow about a month ago. My remarks will be brief, but I'm the state senator for the Middlesex and Worcester District. I represent 14 communities just east of here. I don't represent Bolton, but I do represent the town of Stowe and therefore the Neshoba District. And I just wanted to be here to say a few words. I was been very involved in the efforts when I was a House member in working to change part of the Chapter 70 formula that had some increase for many suburban communities in this area. It goes without saying that education is a very core value of the district I represent. And what I have heard in feedback from school committee persons, selectmen, city councilors, and administrators in my district is making sure that the Chapter 70 formula better appropriates and gives consideration to funding for those children who have special needs and ELL population, growing populations in many of the communities in my district. So I would just ask the Commission to look at that. The other trend that's happened in my district, which has been very encouraging, is that more of the schools are fully regionalizing over the past 4 years, the Ayer and Shirley school districts have regionalized, and the Acton and Boxborough schools have fully regionalized. Before they were just 7 through 12. And I would ask the Commission to consider, is there a place for better rewarding, if you will, school districts to decide to regionalize? They're regionalizing hopefully to save money as well as to provide better educational opportunities for their kids. And I would just ask for the Commission to consider whether there should be a bonus or an increase in the formula to reward schools that have decided to regionalize. So again, thank you very much for hearing me, especially for taking me out of turn. Just in looking out in the audience, I have school committee persons and selectmen from about 3 or 4 of my communities, so I want to thank them for coming. I do hope that they will stand here and testify as well, because I'm just about to go before all 14 communities to talk to them, the selectmen or school committee, about budget, and this is often the top issue. So as I've said to my municipal officials, it's really critical for them for their voice to be heard, including at this commission hearing. So again, thank you very much for hearing me, and best wishes with the rest of the hearing.
Before you go away, let me just check if there are questions from any of the commission members. Seeing none, thank you again for your testimony. Thank you. I note that we're also joined today by Representative Moradian. I saw him earlier. Did you wish to testify, Representative?
You know what, in respect of your time here, I will skip testifying. I can submit written testimony to the board at a further time, but we'll let everyone here use their couple of minutes.
Thank you, Representative. We appreciate the deference. And I also want to note that we have here with us today, forgive me if I get your name wrong, Susan Templeton from the Office of Representative Naughton, who could not be with us today, I understand, because he's on reserve duty, is that right? Correct? Thank you for being with us as well. The next person we have signed up to testify is Sarah. I'm sorry, I can't make out your last name. It begins with an H and seems to be co-signed up with Liz Sorrell.
Thank you. That's Sarah Hewins.
Hewins.
It's spelled like he wins, but it's pronounced Hewins. I want to thank the Commission for letting us all be here today to have this opportunity. My name is Sarah Hewins. I'm with the Board of Selectmen in the town of Carver. And I just want to read a really brief statement that I have. Back in 2009, our free and reduced lunch eligibility was 19.43%. In 2015, our free and reduced lunch eligibility has gone to 24.59%. The Chapter 70 contribution to the total school budget, am I doing something wrong? Was 51%. Say that again. The Chapter 70 contribution to our total school budget was 51% in 2009. In 2015, it's 45.3%. The town's contribution, respectively, was 49% and is now 54.7%. In 5 years, the town has increased its contribution by 5.7%, while the economic indicators in the town show more mortgages underwater, and the free and reduced lunch eligibility has increased. In other words, as the town's ability to raise revenues declines, the funding needs for the school are met by greater contribution from the town. In 2009, we attempted to pass a school debt exclusion for our elementary buildings. It failed. In 2009, fixed MSBA base reimbursement rate for Carver was 56.25%. As you probably know, this base rate is calculated by considering 3 factors: community income factor, community property wealth factor, and community poverty factor. We're once again trying to work with the MSBA to replace our failed buildings, and the 2015 MSBA base rate calculation is still 56.25%. This means Carver's ability to pay based on income, property, wealth, and poverty factors is only 43.75% of the total cost of a new or renovated school building project. The Chapter 70 formula decreases the percentage given to Carver in the same 5 years and increases the town's burden. What I'd like for the Commission to consider, if you will, is consider comparing the MSBA formula and the Chapter 70 formula to see if there's value in addressing this discrepancy. Thank you once again.
Question, go ahead.
Do you happen to know, you cite the town contribution as 54.7%. It's not stated in your material, but do you happen to know what the town's target effort share is?
I'll let our superintendent speak to that.
Currently, the town contributes 74% of its total revenues to the school. Is that what your question was?
No.
No, sorry.
No, because the MSBA reimbursement relates to capital costs, which aren't,
They're
by
different.
definition, are not part of the foundation budget. So
Right.
there's a bit of a mismatch to what you're proposing. So what I was wondering is, if your target share was significantly below 55% or so, which is what your actual contribution is, that would be probably, with all due respect, a better case for you to make.
I see what you're saying. Yes, no, I don't know what our target share is, but the point in putting this together in this way is part of both formulas is your aggregate wealth in your town. And it seems that the formula for MSBA really truly considers the fact that Carver in 2012 had over 900 mortgages underwater, high increase in poverty levels in the town. But in those same years, our contribution, which I also know is based on number of students, and we have lost in 11 years 18% of our students. But in the past few years, we've been level funded, so that's with about $42,000 in a per pupil cost. So I just find it interesting that we are, for capital cost, our ability to pay is like 43%, but for operating costs, our ability to pay, we've chosen to pay, 74% of the town's revenue. I've been to 4 of these now. You've heard me, and I don't mean to take up any more time. But we're at a breaking point. The town has no more money to give us, unless we have an override, which we probably won't get our school if we do that. So we're trying to figure it out. We appreciate your help.
Sort of a point for clarification. I appreciate what you're saying with respect to the discrepancy between what the capital contribution is versus the operating. The MSBA, though, the lowest contribution for any community is about, I believe, 30%. Whereas with the Chapter 70 foundation formula split, the targeted lowest contribution, not the actual, but what we're hoping to get to is 17.5%.
Yes.
So they're on different scales. I think we have heard from your community in the past, and I think to the extent that you can provide us with information as to where your costs are higher than what the foundation budget is assigning to them, that is particularly helpful to us.
Right.
And I think you have done something with respect to your student population on those
Yes, we have.
figures, so that's very
We
helpful.
spent almost 30% of our total budget on 19% of our children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you especially for your diligent attendance at many of our hearings. It's very appreciated.
Thank you.
Sherry Zetlin, sorry. And just, I'll read a few names ahead so people know who's on deck. Joseph Sawyer from Shrewsbury is going to be the next person up to testify.
Good morning. Thank you for holding these hearings to help understand how the foundation budget formula is antiquated and in need of an overhaul. My name is Sherry Zetlin, and I'm a parent from Douglas. With me today is Gina Muscatel from School Committee, Courtney Keegan, our School Business and Operations Manager, and our Superintendent, Norm Yvonne. The underlying premise of the foundation budget and the Chapter 70 funding formula is that it is adequate funding. There are a number of components of the foundation budget formula that does not necessarily represent actual incurred and mandated costs of providing an adequate education. For example, the statewide foundation allotment does not incorporate required state mandates such as Common Core, which keeps changing, State assessments such as PARC and now MCAS, which is changing to PARC, and the required mandated technology and special education costs. The minimum required contribution in Chapter 70 formula also purports to take into consideration a community's ability to pay. There's a difference between ability and willingness to pay. The town of Douglas is above net school spending requirements by $183,894, which seems to indicate that the formula is not realistic. The unfortunate result is that the taxpayers of Douglas are more reluctant to support an override because they feel they're already contributing more than they need to. In Douglas, our last override failed by 4-1. That being said, it's important to note that the taxpayers of Douglas supported the building of a new high school 11 years ago, a new elementary school in 2012, and renovated a middle school. Douglas is 94% residential, and 25% of the land is state forest. Additionally, the state is buying another 375 acres of the state forest. This is property that the Douglas Economic Development Committee had been working with developers to bring in industry. Therefore, the town's ability to bring in another means of relief to the tax base has been impeded. This reduces its ability to increase its business and industrial base. The state is required to make payments in lieu of taxes for this land, and these payments have decreased over $56,000 since 2009. Additionally, the overall state funding provided to local governments has decreased over the past 7 years. In particular, general government, former lottery aid, by $258,892. The decrease in state and federal grants has further exacerbated our financial position. After attending a hearing in another part of the state, it is apparent to me that the formula cannot be a one-size-fits-all approach. An urban district's homeless or ELL population is a different challenge than the smaller communities with very little industry to counteract the predominant residential tax base. In conclusion, as a result of the decrease of Chapter 70 funding, the town of Douglas has had to contribute an additional $183,894 over required net school spending. The school department has cut 20 full-time teachers and other positions such as guidance and paraprofessionals. We have 1 part-time guidance counselor for grades pre-K through 5. Based upon the state's definition of the formula, the funding is not only inadequate, but 20 years after its inception, it is unrealistic. Thank you for your time.
One question. Has your population over that period of time remained stable, increased, or decreased?
It's grown over the past several years.
Thank you.
Superintendent? Superintendent Sawyer?
Right here.
Is that okay?
Good morning, Madam Chairs, Senator Chang Diaz, and Representative Peisch, and members of the Foundation Budget Review Commission. My name is Joe Sawyer. I'm the superintendent of the Shrewsbury Public Schools, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony today. Last year, I had the privilege of serving on the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents School Finance Task Force. I endorse its findings and recommendations, which were submitted to you at an earlier hearing, and my testimony today will try to illustrate how its findings are supported by my own district experiences. Like others around the Commonwealth, for many years, Shrewsbury has coped with the significant opportunity cost problem, where important investments in our instructional program and in maintaining our infrastructure have been deferred because funding has been diverted to areas where there have been explosive cost increases. Even though our school district has consistently been among the lowest 10% in the state for per-pupil expenditures, the foundation budget is still far below the level of actual need. For example, in fiscal year 2014, our actual expenditures in the foundation budget categories were more than $13 million greater than what the formula allotted. The reality is that while our district spent millions less than the foundation formula allots in some categories, we spent many millions more in other categories. One such area was special education, where out-of-district tuition expenditures alone have grown by almost $4 million in just 4 years, a 144% increase, but with only a 14% increase in the number of students actually being tuitioned out. Additionally, even though our health insurance costs are among the very lowest in the state on a per-pupil basis, our community spent almost $4 million more in this category than the foundation budget allotted. Last year, our district spent $2.4 million more than the foundation for classroom teachers. Yet we had an unprecedented class size crisis where the majority of our classes were in the high 20s and low 30s across the district. Fortunately, we're in a much better situation this year due to local funding from our town's first ever operational override. However, sustaining this investment will prove challenging without adequate state financial support for actual costs. For example, a double-digit estimated increase in our health insurance premiums for next year is a major factor that is challenging our town to provide enough funding for the school department to even meet the modest increase estimated to maintain our improved status quo. Our district has been creative in controlling costs where it can. We estimate that we're saving well over a net of $2 million per year through in-district programs for high-needs special education students who otherwise would be tuitioned out. These in-district programs are also saving millions in circuit breaker costs the state would be bearing if these students were educated even in the least expensive out-of-district placements. I strongly suggest that any revisions to state funding mechanisms provide a financial incentive for districts to provide such in-district programs, which keep students in their community schools while helping both local and state budgets. Reform should also address the current reality that when high-cost districts and out-of-district placements move to a new community, it can be extremely disruptive to the budget, such as when our district needed to absorb a $300,000 residential tuition this year when a student moved from out of state. Such uncertainties and surprises exacerbate the opportunity cost problem for local districts. Finally, I suggest that you recommend that a reliable revenue stream be used to fund Chapter 70 and circuit breaker support, similar to what the Massachusetts School Building Authority has via the sales tax, so that funding is more predictable and reliable. I'm extremely grateful for the significant investments that Massachusetts has made in public education since 1993. However, it's become painfully apparent that the foundation budget formula is no longer performing as intended. This places the state's constitutional mandate to provide an adequate education to children in question, and I do wonder whether cases similar to the McDuffie and Hancock cases could be made today. While there's no question it will take political will and courage, I urge this commission to make recommendations that will provide the resources that are truly necessary to meet our duty under the Massachusetts Constitution to effectively educate all of the Commonwealth's children. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak, and thank you for your service in this very important endeavor.
Before I ask for questions, I would just ask you, would you provide a copy of your written remarks? Great, fantastic. Yes, David.
I find the statement remarkable that you're 2.4 million more than foundation for classroom teachers, yet you have exorbitant class sizes. And I know you're very attuned to the math involved. Is there anything that explains it for perhaps unusually high teacher salaries or anything like that?
Our teacher salary average has been below the state average consistently. It's very much in keeping for central Massachusetts rates. This was for fiscal year 14. Those class sizes thankfully were abated, but it was an approximately $3.7 million override investment. A significant amount, about 3/4 of that, I believe, went towards classroom teachers to reduce those class sizes. Without that local investment, we still would be experiencing that class size crisis. And much like other districts, we were cutting over time, and it came to the point where the cuts we started to make were classroom teachers and increasing class size. After cutting administration, curriculum support, we became to the point where we're the lowest 2% in the state in terms of instructional materials and technology. So we were pushing off investments in order to try to maintain our people. It finally got past that point, and without that local override, we'd still be in that situation.
The math that you cite in your testimony was from FY14 pre-override, which means you've reduced class size, but now your gap between the foundation and actual is probably closer to 5 million?
Probably, yeah, at least double what it was last year.
Thank you.
Mr. Sawyer, you spoke a lot about special education costs. You mentioned the circuit breaker. And if you don't have this figure with you, maybe you could get it to us. When you look at your overall cost for special education in Shrewsbury, and you subtract out what the foundation budget gives you and circuit breaker, what percentage is covered, what percentage isn't?
Well, in terms of if you look at foundation and circuit breaker, I don't have that actual figure with me, so I don't want to conject, but it's a significant amount of money that clearly is being moved towards the special education expenditure category away from other areas such as instructional materials, et cetera. It's not coming close to covering the actual cost.
And
Probably a pretty good guesstimate.
A question on David's about the gap between, in the category of classroom teachers, between your actuals and Chapter 70 allotment. You know, I hear you saying it's not a unusual teacher salary rate. So I guess it's just a reiteration of its question. Can you offer any theory about what it is that's driving that gap?
Well, I think the assumption made in the foundation budget for teacher salaries is much lower than what the actual realities are. I know that there's been conjecture that the reality compared to 1993 in terms of the number of teachers with master's degrees, virtually all of our teachers in Shrewsbury have master's degrees, and the rate of increase in salary costs just over that 20-plus years has certainly outpaced the inflation factor, as well as what the original assumption made, I believe, in the base formula for the foundation. So it's not an unusual situation in terms of what teacher compensation is in our community, and the number of, and even with our class size guidelines are actually a little bit more conservative than a lot of districts. Even hitting our target, we're in the low to mid 20s compared to, I know, some communities that really target more high teens, low 20s. And so even with that, we still weren't able to keep up with our population growth.
Okay, thank you. Representative.
Same general topic. Overall, when we look at the foundation budget and the differences between what it assumes and actuals, cost of teachers is not, it's higher, but it's not on the same level as, say, the health insurance. So I'm just, what's the total amount that, if you know, that Shrewsbury spends on classroom teachers, just to get a sense of proportion? In
that particular category, and I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say that it was we spent about $27.5 million in that particular category. Of course, that's not all teachers, but that's that category of teachers compared to about $25 million in the foundation.
Thank you. Thanks. Joe? Come back to you.
Addressing the charge of the commission itself and looking at the foundation budget calculations and changes to the calculations. In that context, I've been looking at this as one of two approaches in an environment of limited revenues. One is to tweak the current budget, and one is to the current calculations for the foundation budget, and two is to redesign, a major redesign. Setting aside limitations of time and energy right now, but how do you look at this problem?
I would be reluctant to say that I have any great ideas about total redesign, but I think the fact that there are so many different sources of funding that local districts are or rely upon from Chapter 70. Obviously, local aid is part of the same pot. The circuit breaker system is a reimbursement, so it's trailing, so it's a problematic situation when you experience a lot of cost increases in one particular year. Our district, like many, started instituting fees several years ago for transportation and athletics and activities and those kinds of things. So in terms of what's required, clearly I think the foundation budget, the idea around equity, that it takes into account the profile of the students in a district is very important. But in terms of elements of, particularly around things like special education, I think combining some of the various sources, including grants, may make sense. But I haven't thought of a total redesign idea myself, but I appreciate the thinking.
In a previous hearing, changed the census from once a year to maybe twice. How would that affect you and especially like special needs students?
Well, it would depend. We have a fairly stable population, so I don't think it would have a large effect on us, although I think like a lot of districts, students who tend to be classified as English language learners do tend to arrive at different points during the year, and that census may change, and that might have some benefit for ours and other districts. But for a district like ours with a very stable population, I don't see that making too much of a difference.
I have a question of a special needs students who needs outplacement coming in the middle of the year, do you?
Well, now the way that the system is set up is a student that arrives after April 1st doesn't take effect till the following fiscal year, with exceptions if that student's in a publicly funded, for example, in a collaborative, or in the situation I described in my testimony when the student moves from out of state, you have to assume those costs immediately. Fortunately, we were able to absorb those costs this year, but in other years that could have really put us in a very difficult position with no opportunity from the state to really assist with that.
Yes, I'm going to go back to the fact that you had mentioned that there was a 3.7 override this year, and that was what kind of helped you out with, leveling your students with the teacher ratio. What are the plans for the upcoming year?
Well, we've made, the school committee, or I've made a recommendation to our school committee and to the town for a budget increase of a little over 3%. The amount to actually just take our existing program and move it forward is actually under that. It's about a little over, somewhere around the 2.7, 2.8%, which we think is a very realistic and modest request. But given the fact that our community is looking to try to fully fund its pension obligation by 2022, which is a very aggressive schedule, where healthcare costs are jumping substantially after a few years where those premiums did not jump as fast. There are already, and obviously this year there's been a lot of work my colleagues and I have done around snow and ice control, and those excess costs, if they're there, are going to come right off the top next year. So even with a very modest request, I believe it's among the lowest of local districts for next fiscal year. Our community, right now, the town manager's recommendation is substantially below that recommendation that I've made, even at that number. So the sustainability question is for local communities without additional state support, local aid, or Chapter 70, or full circuit breaker funding. That's what tends to be causing the unpredictability and the concern about sustainability.
Very popular, Superintendent. Thank you very much. The next two folks we have signed up to testify are Stacy Jackson and Daryl McGall. I also want to note, I'm told that Representative Campanelli is here. Did you wish to testify, Representative? No. Okay. Thank you for being here with us. And I also note that Representative Hogan has joined us. Do you wish to testify, Representative? If we'll call you up after the two ladies that we have coming up next. And sorry, I've been remiss to note that we have also been joined by two more commissioners, Senator Jalen of Somerville and Anne Marie Cunha, who is representing the Association of School Committees. Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Stacy Jackson. I'm a school committee representative from Holden. I'm joined here with Julie Kelly, school committee representative, and we're also speaking on behalf of Steve Hemman, executive director for the Mass Association of Regional School Committees. He couldn't join us. We're so appreciative that the commission was formed to look at the foundation. I think everyone involved in education in Massachusetts know that the foundation formula is a bit outdated. I would also like to respectfully request that the commission look at all aspects of state funding. And as I tell my children all the time, don't just complain about a problem, offer a solution, so I will do that as well. In April 2005, a report was issued by the then Massachusetts Department of Education titled Local and State Funding for Public Schools, Restoring the Link with Community Wealth. That report specifically states, and I quote, "The formula should not impose annual increases that surpass Proposition 2.5 capacity." But that's exactly what we've been seeing happening with the MLC increases mandated to the towns. In August 2011, a report to the legislature was issued by the Special Commission on School District Collaboration and Regionalization, which a lot of people in the room today were a part of. And it strongly supports regionalization towards the towns. And while there are certainly benefits to regionalizations, we've seen that there's an alarming inability of towns, especially regional towns, to meet their legislative mandates of MLC. We all know that foundation is very low, but a lot of towns and districts are able to supplement that by optional operations override to be able to go above foundation. But what we're finding, especially in regional districts, there are usually 1, 2, 3 towns that aren't able to even afford their MLC increases. We started looking at specifically our district, the Wachusett district, and then we've expanded that to look at 54 towns in central Massachusetts. And what we found is that about 50% of them do have a problem where their MLC increases have been significantly larger than 2.5%, or their MLC has taken up a huge percentage of their new revenue. We know new revenue for a town, we know any revenue for a town, about half of it's going towards education and the other half goes towards town services. And of the education, MLC is just one part of that. What we're seeing is in some cases, the MLC is taking up 50, 60, 70, over 100% of their new revenues. As a result of that, town services are decimated. Proposed solution. What we are recommending that everyone look at is if an MLC is taking up significantly more than 2.5, if its increase is going up more than 2.5, or if MLC is taking up more than about 30% of new revenue, a trigger should be in place to look at that to make sure that the towns can afford even their MLC. And without looking at all aspects of state funding, anything that we do with the foundation formula is not going to be that important if we're finding that the towns can't even offer services as well as the schools. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We are sharing some data up there of the 54 towns that we looked at. Any questions?
Seeing none, you're off the hook. Thank you. Representative Hogan, did you want to come down?
Can I just make a comment too, just while
Yeah.
she's coming down? Obviously, when they say Holden, Wachusett Regional School District is my district and where I live. And I would just say to the commission as an additional resource, the data that's in here is very compelling, and if there are further questions, I'm certain that people would be more than willing to have follow-up and come back and meet or provide whatever additional information you need.
Representative.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome the Massachusetts Foundation Budget Review Commission to the Neshoba Regional School District and my 3rd Middlesex District. I hope you get to enjoy it above and beyond this today. But I would like to very basically present to you and respectfully suggest that SPED costs and the current funding levels do not reflect the current realities around the number of students with needs and also the more complex needs we're working with in our districts. We know that SPED costs are on the rise as the number of children with severe disabilities increase. However, state aid for special education is not keeping pace. The Chapter 70 foundation budget limits the counting of special ed student enrollment to 3.5% of overall enrollment, when we know the state average is much higher, and it is resulting in our funding gap. I respectfully suggest consideration of raising the cap on assumed special need enrollment for in-district students. This provision would help close the funding gap and would not incentivize districts to place students in special education. Thank you to the legislators and to the stakeholders here today working to keep our educational system a model for our country. Thank you very much.
And before you go anywhere, let me just check if there are questions from the commission. I do have one brief one. You mentioned that raising the cap on assumed in-district special ed would not incentivize districts to overdiagnose. Can you say a little bit more about that? What causes you to arrive at that conclusion?
Well, just looking at numbers, I mean, you can just assume that that might and could be a problem looking at past history and looking forward and looking any ways out to look at formulas. We don't want to get trapped into formulas that end up creating problems on the whole.
Thank you. With that, that brings us to, oh, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure there's no other questions. Okay. Elaine Rabbit is the next person we have signed up to testify, and then after, sorry, this one.
Yep.
After Ms. Rabbit would be Robert Cohane from the Worcester Public Schools.
Dr. McCall was, you had called.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Wachusett.
sorry. Dr. McCall, please come on down. I thought that the last two were in lieu of you, so I'm sorry for my confusion about that. Go.
Hello, my name is Darryl McCall. I'm the superintendent of the Wachusett Regional School District in central Massachusetts. I represent 5 towns, Paxton, Sterling, Rutland, Princeton, and Holden. We have over 7,000 students in our school district. We have 1,000 employees, and we have about 155 square miles. So we are the largest regional school district in terms of budget, in terms of students, and in terms of employees. Recently, we have been, unfortunately, put into a situation where we are going to receive 9C cuts, which is basically our regional transportation being cut by almost $1 million. That's money that will actually be coming out of this year's school budget. So we will be in a situation where, although we only had a modest 1.4% increase between FY14 and FY15, our budget will actually decrease this year. So FY15 will be below FY14. We're in a situation right now where we are the 10th lowest school district in the state in terms of per pupil expenditure at $11,131. We're the 2nd lowest regional school district in the state. This makes it very difficult for us to continue to maintain our excellent educational endeavors in our schools, and we are feeling it from class size to technology to textbooks and instructional support and supplies. One of the main issues that we're dealing with is really health insurance. This year we have about an 8.7% increase between FY15 and FY16, which results in about $1 million increase for us. This is not sustainable. It doesn't allow us to then take our funds and put it back into our school system. So that's really an area that I'd love to focus on ultimately. We have over 700 employees who take health insurance with us. So it's an awful lot of money. And these are just some examples of some of the items that we've not been able to focus on over the years. In terms of technology, we have about 1,500 working computers in our school. Over 1,000 of those computers are over 10 years old. We have textbooks that are used by our high school students that are actually older than the students using them. We spend about 50 cents a student at our high school on math and about $1 a student in science at our high school. And that's just for instructional support and supplies. So I'm really asking that we continue to look at the foundation budget in general so that there's a little more equity in terms of how the funding works.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. I have one brief one. You mentioned healthcare costs, which is a theme, as I'm sure will not surprise you. We hear at all of the hearings. Has Wachusett Regional joined the GIC?
Yes, we were actually in the GIC, and we pulled out of GIC because the costs were actually up and were greater when we were in GIC. So there was a quick drop when we moved from non-GIC to GIC, and then we were able to leave GIC and save money. We saved several $100,000 when we left. So,
See, but paying a lower rate than you would if you were in the GIC. Elaine Rabbit, come on up.
Opportunity to speak before the Foundation Budget Commission. My name is Elaine Rabbit, and I'm from the Dudley-Charlton Regional School District. I serve on the school committee. I'm a parent, and I also work as a special education parent consultant and trainer throughout central Massachusetts. And I'm here to actually answer a challenge that Representative Ferguson had offered me in January when I met her at the Mass Association of School Committees Regionals dinner meeting. So, in speaking about the Foundation Commission and the work that you've been doing throughout the state, one of the things Representative Ferguson had said was that she was interested in hearing something new, and she was interested in hearing a solution. So what I'd actually like to do is to turn around and share with you that I actually have a different perspective on the work that you're doing. And I think in order to address some of the needs that have been very articulately said by my colleagues in the room, the first thing that we need to do is to address the current terminology of special education versus general education. Because what I would charge with you is that the concept of special education is actually sitting in our general education classrooms. Our teachers today no longer have the Norman Rockwell classroom of having students that sit in their classroom that come in ready to learn and come in without a backpack of baggage. But today, the issues of mental health, the issues of social issues that come into our classrooms, the fact that the majority of our special education students are actually sitting in our general education classrooms, and that topics like Title I, ELL, those students actually feed into our general education classrooms. So one, I would charge that fact that we need to actually create a new profile of what our general education student is, what they require, and that is what we have to fund. So in my district, we have elementary schools that have populations of over 400, 450 students, yet we only have one school psychologist that is there to deal with all of those social, emotional issues that students have. Our general education teachers are given the impossible task of trying to sit in front of a classroom of 20 to 25 to 30 students and not only address the curriculum needs, but to also address the needs that they bring into school with them. Yet, at best, we can fund having a teacher in the classroom, but we're not able to fund all of the other supports that we need to have for our students. Secondly, to offer you a solution in the long term, I think we need to look at how we prepare our teachers to come into our classrooms to teach. The concept of having a teacher that's going to come into a classroom that is trained to teach a curriculum, trained to teach a content area is no longer sufficient. Our teachers that come in actually do need to be special education teachers. I personally can tell you that in my own experience with my son, the best years that he has had as a general education student with special education needs has been in a classroom that has been led by a special education teacher running a general education classroom. I also charge that we need to look at how we prepare our teachers to come into our classroom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rabbit. Before you go away, check for questions. I do have one. As a former classroom teacher myself, I can appreciate deeply the tableau that you've painted for us of the very wide and diverse range of needs that are coming into play aside from academic instruction. The foundation formula currently, makes an attempt to account for much of that with the different allotment categories that there are for, ELL, special ed, low income, recognizing that much of that is integrated. It doesn't actually occur in separate silos, but mathematically we try and, do some add-on funding for those categories. Would you advocate to us that there are additional categories of wraparound services or some other term that I'm missing that we are missing in the current formula that we need to add, that the current categories don't account for, or is it that the classroom teaching category just needs to be larger in general? Is there a particular mechanism that you would suggest to us?
And I think one of them is the mental health component. So in my particular district, as I mentioned, we have a school psychologist at 4 elementary buildings. Our middle schools have class grades that are over 200 students with one person to address those needs. And when you go into the high school, the numbers are the same. So I think that the amount of students that come in that don't fall into the category of special education are students that are dealing with mental health, depression, anxiety, those things that come along with it. There's no way in the current formula that those needs are even addressed. So to look at adding staff that addresses those needs, that's one thing that is not accounted for in the current formula. Secondly, from personal experience, and what I will tell you is that in the 5th grade, my son was one of 24 students in a general education/inclusion classroom. 9 of those students were on IEPs. It didn't include the students that were on 504s, and it didn't include the students that had the emotional, social issues that come in. And it's absolutely an impossible task to think that a teacher can teach to the diverse needs of a classroom like that. Our district is also put in the uncomfortable position that we can't afford to add staff. Like many of the districts that are standing here talking before you, we have been level funded for 5 out of the past 6 years. And the recent increases that we got from our 2 towns were so minimal, $70,000 in one and $100,000 in another, that we can't even begin to tackle the needs that we have in our district. When we had our conversation as a school committee regarding MCAS versus Park, the reality is we have 200 Chromebooks that need to test 2,000 students. So the testing component alone can't be done, let alone providing an opportunity for children to be learning in a 21st century environment, because we don't have it. The reality is, with the towns and the financial structure, my son will be well beyond the educational component before we can even begin to address those needs. So I applaud the fact that the Foundation Budget Commission is out there looking at it. I just offer the component that we really need to be rethinking what it is. When the formula was designed, these types of things that we're talking about did not even exist in our classrooms to those days. As a student, I sat in the Norman Rockwell classroom with the teacher that we were all in there doing the same thing. We came from 2-parent homes. We were supported. That is not the experience that children have today. I, through what I do as a special education consultant and trainer, travel throughout central Massachusetts, not only presenting in districts, but working in districts. And I can tell you the challenges that I face. I feel so empathetic for the people that I sit at the team with, because I sit with educators that are truly passionate about wanting to help children that can't do it because either they weren't prepared for it through their training coming in from college, or they don't have the resources. And really importantly, they don't have the time. There is not one district that I walk into, regardless of the economic structure of that district, can give a child anything more than the bare minimum. And that's a serious issue that we need to address. Our district of 4,000 students, less than 5% of those students are in and out of district placement. All of those students are existing in our schools. They are supposed to be leaving our schools, prepared to go out into the community, to have gainful employment, to prepare to have families, and to turn around and pay taxes to pay for the people that are coming behind them. We're not putting those students out.
An additional follow-up, this goes somewhat beyond the scope, above our pay grade, if you will, but I think speaks to the issue of root causes that we're trying to diagnose. I think what I hear you describing is that there are sort of, realities of 21st century education that are different than, in the latter century, or the former century, rather, as opposed to there used to be more mental health and social emotional need resources that have been squeezed out in the budget squeeze of recent years. Is that an accurate?
In our district, never existed. They don't exist. We have an exceptionally bare bones. It can't get any bare bones than it already is, but it's never existed. We've never had it.
Changing.
The students are changing. We can't change the model for them.
Can you opine at all on what you see as the drivers of that reality? What is it that is increasing the stressors on students' lives that's different, in this decade than in the last decade?
One, and I can speak from personal component, the financial history that we've just been through the last years, the fact that most families don't have one working parent. We have multiple working, our parents are working, both working, and sometimes multiple jobs. And we're talking about the fact that the impact and in what we're trying to do to prepare our students better and offer better opportunity and present better knowledge is also creating a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety on children. I have friends that have students that are beginning to enter the standardized testing world that are physically, symptomatically sick getting ready for testing because we have such stress on us to perform well as a district so that we can be funded, so that we can have resources out there, that we're creating ill children in the meantime. I know that we're very well intentioned in what we do, but we don't always think about the counterpoint to those intentions that we put out there for our students. So in the work that I do within the special education community, within the disability realm, the area, if we were to add one element to our discussion, it is the mental health issue that is in no way covered under this budget. Families are charged with trying to access those services independently, which they can, some can and some cannot, and the agencies that we have within the state aren't in a situation to help us either, because they're also standing in front of legislation asking for funding.
This is more of a comment and a request to think more about the larger issue. You mentioned the economic stressors as contributing to the increase in student mental health needs, and this is something that we have heard, certainly Senator Chang Diaz and I, in our role as Education Committee chairs, are hearing that quite a bit from superintendents. However, that also suggests that it will be very difficult for us to implement any recommendations that require a substantial increase in funding, because that would require people who are under financial pressure already to pay more taxes, which is very challenging. One of the charges of this commission, in addition to identifying the components of the foundation budget that may be do not reflect reality, is also to try to identify more efficient ways of delivering services, with the hope that in combination we can provide some real relief and not a situation where we make recommendations that are so unlikely to be able to be implemented that we really don't address the problems you're talking about. So I don't expect an answer to this morning or this afternoon. I think it's noontime now, but I would encourage you to think about both sources of revenue and other mechanisms for delivering some of these services, not necessarily the mental health services, but the educational services in general that may free up some funding for the kinds of things that we have not been able to address.
One comment, it actually is a two-part comment to it. One of them is that there are school districts, our school district itself has tried to engage with other resources within the community, such as UINC and PPAL, which are agencies that support families to try and work in partnership to help students within our districts. But both of us are at the table asking for your money. So somehow we have to be able to resource it without penalizing one component of that faction. And secondly, I guess I'm going to speak as a parent and I'm going to speak as a school committee member. It befuddles me that when we sit and we talk and we try and educate our communities, we try and educate parents, we try and educate legislation to this issue, I'm really troubled by the component of really not maximizing the opportunity that we have when we're looking at educating students. Because if we actually invest in our students at this point in time and we maximize what we're doing for them, we're actually providing community members that are going to go out and need less from us down the road. And this is the struggle that I have when I work in the special education community, because if I don't maximize the educational experience for our students, then they're going to be leaving our system, accessing public supports of food stamps and mass health and subsidized housing. So I really just have to challenge you with that theory. I have to challenge everyone with that theory, because I really think that as a taxpayer, the best investment I can make is in the future of my community, and that is through education. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, one more question for you.
I want to thank you. That has been the most realistic appraisal of what's going on that any teacher or administrator in any school knows about. And we can talk, for example, about the problem with drugs, okay? We can have all sorts of things, but until we address what we're going to do besides trying to prepare students to take a job in business, that we have to have them get through schools in a way that they can be productive themselves and be wholesome, that I think this is very, very important that we realize that. And for so much, people are not willing to accept the fact that if we want to be able to have good business in this state, we not only need a good transportation system, but we have to spend more money on education and the types of wraparound services that are necessary. Thank you so much for your opinion.
That brings us back again to Mr. Cohane. And then after Mr. Cohane is Bruce Chutter.
Thank you for having this opportunity to talk to you here in Central Massachusetts. I greatly appreciate it. My name is Rob Cohane. I am a parent of 2 boys in the Worcester Public Schools. I'm not an educational professional. I'm a consumer of education. And but in the same way, I'm involved with the Citywide Parent Planning Advisory Council in Worcester, which is a self-explanatory group of parents from across the city that are trying to encourage the educational process, work with it, educate parents and resources and those types of things. And through that activity, I've kind of gotten involved in trying to understand where the money comes from, and on my own time kind of try to learn and figure out this formula, which I don't necessarily envy you for taking on this challenge. But nonetheless, what I've seen in that time is, and I'm sure you've already heard this, but special education, health insurance, and inflation, their parts of these formulas are antiquated and are no longer providing the funds that the school systems need. And in a city like ours, Worcester, where we have the urban challenges of providing public services and maintaining roads and safe safe environment for our children and all the families that live in our city, it's difficult to make up that gap when 20% of the foundation budget is going to fill in the gaps for health insurance, inflation, and special education. There isn't a whole lot of space to take that money from. So who ends up paying for that is the children, the students. Again, 20% of that foundation budget is being pulled out of the classroom. Simple things like photocopiers. At the school my boys go to, Worcester Arts Magnet, the parents are paying for the photocopier. The parents are paying for most of the copier paper. Why is that important? Because the school system not only cannot afford that, but they can't afford the textbooks. So we need to make photocopies in order to provide the materials for our students to learn. Leads to another part of the problem as we start talking about PARC and these other things that are so technology-based. The cost of implementing that technology in the classroom to make sure that our students have an equitable chance. The whole ed reform thing was about equity. That our students have an equitable chance to compete with their peers across the state. There's no money for that technology. There's no support there. So again, we go back to the photocopiers. And again, we go back to these things that we have to spend money. And that's money, you know, we talk about taxpayers not willing to pay more. The parents in my community are paying more. It may not be a tax, but we're paying. And most of the parents in our community are happy to do so because we see where that's going. You know, we talk about some of the solutions that are out there. The circuit breaker model doesn't seem to be working. Most of the time, the circuit breakers are not funded to 100%. There's no revenue tied to them that guarantees that if we need to apply for a circuit breaker, that money's going to be there to come back to us. Never mind the problem that it's a delay down the road. By the time you get that money into your system, it's 2 years gone spent. So those are just some of the things that I see as a parent that don't seem to make sense and could cause problems and certainly continue to do so. I think that covers pretty much everything I wanted to say. But again, I just want to thank you for the time, and I appreciate you listening to me.
And thank you for all of the good citizen time that you have taken and, to educate yourself on the Chapter 70 formula and the foundation budget and parenting in general. Any questions from the commission? Seeing none, thank you again. As you go return to your seat, I did just want to make a point of information for you and for others that in a bond bill passed by the legislature last year, the legislature and you in turn as taxpayers did actually provide a pot of money. I forget the number off the top of my head. It was in the tens of millions of dollars for IT capital needs for our public schools, not only for PARC implementation, but presumably much of that would go to prepare schools that are not currently prepared with the technology infrastructure. So it's not a panacea, but there is some pot of money out there for that.
Does that deal with sustaining technology, or is that just implementation?
I believe it's upfront capital costs, so not
Grants.
necessarily for grants to cities and towns for that.
So as we've learned since '93, sustaining technology is just as important.
Fair point. Duly noted. Mr. Treader. And then after Mr. Treader, we have signed up Ralph Hicks and then Richard Bedard.
Hi, I'm Bruce Treader. I'm from Westboro. First, thanks very much to the Commission for coming to Central Massachusetts. I've been to 2 of these hearings so far, and the testimony seems to be very consistent, and there's a gap between the available funding, the assumptions, and the expectations of our educational system, and that seems to be one of the problems. what I wanted to mention was, I wanted to ask one thing. Are there any questions, or is there anything, and this isn't to be answered right now, that you're hearing, or is there any more information that you would like to hear to be able to come to some sort of resolution as you deliberate? It's not something to answer right now, but something to consider, and perhaps post those questions for further. I think you have one more hearing after this. But then somebody here said if you're going to make a comment, you may as well have an idea of some sort of a solution. And actually part of your charge is to look at the services that we provide now and how we prepare our students for testing and also for their futures. And like I was talking with one of our Finance Committee members who's here from Westboro today, and have mentioned to others, I think a way to look at it is to do what's called a zero-based review. What is it exactly we're expecting? What type of content and skills do we expect our graduating seniors to have when they leave our K-12 system? And upon looking at that, then saying, okay, how affordable is that? Is it affordable? Can we actually do it realistically? Because you've heard of the problem that towns and districts have to deal with right now. The gulf is wide between expectations, assumptions, and the available funding. And I don't see the funding changing very much in the near future. So what is it exactly we're expecting of our students? How can we then prepare them for that? And once we come up with an idea of what those requirements are and the available funding and the realistic funding to be able to do that, then we can go ahead and proceed and then put together a formula that makes sense to divide the available funds equitably. That's what I have.
Great. Any questions from the committee? Thank you again, Mr. Trotter.
Thanks very much.
Take care. Mr. Hicks? Hicks? Did I say it right? Is it Hicks or? Is it Hicks? Yes. Or, okay.
Yes. Good afternoon, Representative Peisch, Senator Diaz, members of the commission. Thank you for giving up many Saturdays. I'm only giving up one to be here and doing what you were doing, but what you're doing is very important. I've been in education 47 years, and I'm going to start off by saying that I'm retiring at the end of this year. My past 11 years, I've been a superintendent. I would really, in retirement, like to see that the Commonwealth lives up to the expectations of horse, man, and our forefathers in terms of providing the communities in this Commonwealth the money that they need to educate our children for the global economy in which they have to compete in. Right now, it's very difficult for us to complete our mission. I am the superintendent of schools of the Ashburnham-Westminster Regional School District. We have 2,370 kids in north central Massachusetts. We're an academic district, not a vocational district. We serve the needs of two very socioeconomic communities. One community has more of an ability to pay than the other, and that oftentimes it's at cross-references when we go to do our assessments. The money which we received from assessments last year gave us a little over 1% in terms of a total increase in our budget. Meanwhile, we received the $25 a student that we get for being a suburban, rural / community, which translated into $56,200, or 0.2% of an increase on our budget. I fully recognize that local aid to cities and towns has taken a hit over the past several years as well. But Massachusetts, being the educational leader that we are, we need to be able to fund education if we're going to maintain that leadership position, not only in the United States, but in the world. Mandates are a problem. You've heard it from other people, whether it be IDEA, transferring over to the Common Core curriculum, the new teacher evaluation system, which I fully support, MKIA, retail, ELL, which is becoming a more costly program, even in a district like mine. We have a shortfall in various areas. Our health insurance costs are killing us. Last year's increase was 7.5%. This year's is 10.8%. Right now, we're in the middle of trying to bargain a GIC-like plan, if you will, with our employees, because to join the GIC would cost us money, and that is under Chapter 68 and 69. If that happens, our increase will only be 5.8%, which is certainly better than 10.8%. But when the inflationary index for New England is right around 1.5%, we can see that we have a real problem with health insurance. Others have spoken of special education. I could do the same thing, but I'm not going to do that today. We basically need $1 million more next year than we have to be able to function the way that we're functioning today. We have about $400,000 in E&D that we can put towards next year's budget. Gives us a shortfall of about $600,000. Overrides do not pass in my communities. The last override that we had was in 2004. As a result of that, I'm having a serious talk with my principals Monday morning and going to the school committee Tuesday night, and we're going to outline which teaching positions we feel we need to cut. And those teaching positions will increase class sizes that we've worked very, very frugally at to try and keep at a level where we can have some order in the classroom and we can have attention to give those children who need the extra attention the attention that they need. I want to thank you very much for being here, for taking the time, like I said, out of your Saturdays to do this daunting task. And I wish you nothing but the best. But the foundation budget definitely needs to be changed. It certainly is not adequate for the mission that all of us have to perform. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Superintendent. Questions? Kim?
Yes, Representative Ferguson.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Just two quick things. Only from experience, I've sat across the table with you many a time in many a meeting with my colleagues in North Central Mass. Can you just share with the commission, first of all, following up on what Elaine was saying, the mental health component, you and I have had specific conversations about that. But just for example, in your middle school and high school, and I know the middle school in particular is a problem with what you're able to fund and what the kids need staffing-wise, because we've been having a conversation about that. And secondly, could you just shed 2 seconds worth of light on the fact that you have 2 communities in a regional school district? And I know you mentioned it briefly, but just the extreme differences between the 2 communities, and when you try to work on a budget every year, how difficult that is with 2 towns in a region.
Thank you very much. It is. And Representative Ferguson represents part of Westminster, and we're grateful to have her as our representative. First, in the middle school, we have a 600 pupil middle school, grades 6 through 8. We have had 1 guidance counselor and an adjustment counselor. The guidance counselor retired last month. We shoehorned some money in, and we were able to hire a 2nd guidance counselor. However, I will tell you right now that on the chopping block for next year is that 2nd guidance counselor. We have 2 school psychologists in the system. We're doing better than Dudley Charlton, but that gives the middle school about maybe a quarter or a half of a school psychologist. The problems that kids come to school with today, you've heard this from other people today, you've heard them in other hearings, I'm sure, are insurmountable. I used to be a special education director for 30 years before I was a superintendent. And I got to tell you, folks, the kids that we're getting today compared to when I started teaching in 1968, it's night and day. It's absolutely night and day. I'm not going to go into the reasons. I think a lot of you have your own ideas on why we have that problem. And we don't have the way in which to be able to serve these kids' needs. It's pathetic. We could save a lot of these kids. We could stop the dropouts from taking place in many respects. We could go ahead and we could give these kids a future. But if the kid isn't ready to learn, if he's emotionally distraught because mom or dad has an alcohol or a drug problem, or he's left home alone at night, a whole myriad of reasons why that happens. I did talk at the Shine Initiative about a year ago. I don't know if you were there or not, Kim, but about the legislature, if and when you've ever got the money, and I don't think we're ever going to have the money, let's face that, but I think we got to make the money, and you know how you got to do that. We need a specific initiative for counselors in our schools. We really do, because most schools do not have the number of counselors that they need to be able to meet these kids' needs. And I'm not talking just junior high, middle school, and high school kids, elementary kids as well, who come to school with an awful lot of baggage, an awful lot of damage. As far as my 2 towns go, Representative Ferguson is right. Westminster is the wealthier of the 2 towns. And frequently what happens, folks, is Westminster is willing to give us more money than Ashburnham. But because of the statutory method that we have to use for raising our money in assessments, we have to say, gee, thanks a lot, we appreciate it, but we can't take it, because Ashburnham cannot match their percentage. Now, last year, oddly enough, because Montechusett Vocational Regional Technical High School sent their assessments out late, Westminster wound up being the town that couldn't give us as much. And we have to say, thank you to Ashburnham. Talk about frustration. Let me tell you. But I understand there was an exception made, and I don't know if it was by legislation or by regulation at DESE, where towns that got their assessments late from the vote text were able to push that off to the following year. And that's the reason Westminster couldn't give us as much money as formula-wise that Ashburnham was willing to do so. And it's like banging your head against a brick wall, folks. It really is. It's very, very difficult. We're a special breed, and there's many reasons to be in a regional school district, a lot of good reasons, a lot of advantages educationally, administratively, and financially. But when we come to put our assessments together, folks, it can be a very harrowing experience to see that one town says, yeah, we'll give you what you need. The other town says, sorry, we can't. And then the other town's going to say, can't give you what we wanted to give you. So I hope that helps.
A question on that. Is it not a matter for the regional school district agreement to articulate if the member districts wish to have differential levels of assessment? You're not permitted to do that by statute, or is that governed by your regional school district agreement?
Are you talking about what if a town wants to give you more than their assessment? I guess that could be in the regional agreement. I'm not a lawyer. I'd have to talk to our attorney about that. But the way it's written right now, we're using the statutory method because the method in the regional agreement that we have is basically illegal. And we have rewritten our regional agreement, and we're hoping, fingers crossed, that in May at the town meetings, we're going to have a new regional agreement. But there would have to be some language in terms of that. And I will call our attorney Monday, and I'm going to ask him if that's something that's feasible or not, because I honestly don't know.
It's beyond the scope of the work of this commission, but from a legislative standpoint, if there is a statutory barrier for groups of districts that wish to have that flexibility, we'd certainly want to know about it.
We can't accept gifts, and I know the previous district I was superintendent in, I've only been superintendent in 2 districts. One town gave us $75,000 a year for 3 years to get a behavior program up off the ground. The other town wasn't, for some reason, able to give us their share of the money. And the kids from both towns actually benefited from that program. And it stopped a lot of kids from going out and out of district placements. So gifts can be done. I don't know, and I guess it would have to be on a gift basis. I don't know that we can have the agreement language to do that. But I will check with our attorney. It's a good question. Thank you all for being here. Take care.
I just want to ask, you had mentioned something about going to your school committee meeting on Monday evening? Tuesday, with a list of positions.
Yes.
Could you let us know what those positions are?
I can email them. Who's the best person to email them to?
Oh, probably. It would probably to Jen, yeah.
Will that work, and she can get it to you?
Okay. Yeah.
Perfect.
Please. Thank you.
I will do that. Okay, thanks. Thank you very much, everyone.
One
Yes, sir.
question, very brief. Can you tell us, Dr. Hicks, what the changes in enrollment have been for your district recent years, up or down?
We're actually having a slight upswing. We went down for a number of years. And the Kevin Costner movie about where he says, if you build it, they will come. We built a new elementary school in Ashburnham. And I got to tell you, folks, it's fascinating. When I went there 4 years ago, there were a gazillion houses for sale. And for sale signs everywhere. Now, you drive through Ashburnham, there are very few for sale signs. Those houses have been sold. Why? Because the smart realtors take the young families and they drive by Williams Road and they show them the beautiful new elementary school. So we're actually on an upswing. We've also increased our school choice numbers, which of course pillages other communities, but you got to do what you got to do to survive. But we have an increase in enrollment. Okay. Thank you all.
Ask you to say that again in a second. Mr. Bedard? Is it Bedard? Bedard?
Bedard.
Bedard.
Hey. I would like to thank the Foundation Budget Review Commission for their commitment to education, especially as Dr. Hicks mentioned, spending so many of your Saturdays away from your family and friends to attend these hearings. I know you are highly invested in the process. My name is Rick Bedard. I'm the school business manager for Millbury Public Schools, which is a medium-sized community just south of Worcester. I've been a school business manager for the past 13 years, and I'm currently on the MASBA board as the vice president. I'd like to discuss 2 issues with you this morning. One is health insurance, and the second is retirees' health insurance. In Millbury, we have worked for many years with the town and union leaders and the Insurance Advisory Committee to bring down the cost of health insurance. Health care currently represents just under $5 million, or 13.4% of the town of Millbury's budget. For Millbury Public Schools this year, we have just to cover $4 million just for the health care costs.
and that represents 17.5% of our net school spending budget. Specifically, in order to help defray the cost of health care, Millbury has increased the employees' premium portion, deductibles, co-pays. We have also bid health care to one provider, saving the community funds and jobs for classroom teachers and municipal services. We're getting very close to the GIC. The results have been positive. Due to the cost savings and also some reductions in staffing over the last few years, our school department health care costs have decreased by $145,000 or 3.7% over the past 3 years. We're doing our part. Even with those decreases, the foundation allocation for health insurance is still low. For Millbury, the employee benefits or health care expenditure amount on this year's Schedule 19, as I said, is $4 million. The allocation under the fiscal 15 foundation formula for health care is $1.6 million. That represents a $2.4 million shortfall on a $22 million budget. It also means we are spending 2.5 times the foundation allocation. It is imperative that we build in additional funds in the foundation formula for the employee benefit allocation. In addition, perhaps you could tie in health care costs based upon the region your community resides, much like we do for wage adjustments. My second but related topic is retirees' health insurance. Currently, retirees' health insurance is only calculated into net school spending if the community checked off a box in 1993. Can you imagine that? Almost like a certain taxpayer having a higher tax rate based on something they checked off many years ago. That needs to change. Over time, we need to phase in and establish a level playing field. DESE provides the public with data on each community's spending over net school spending. Can anyone really rely on that data, knowing that we are comparing net school spending with and without retirees' health care costs? Millbury, for example, would have a net school spending over foundation of 6 percentage points lower if the retirees' health calculation was not included. In fact, that adjustment would put us closer to the state average. We hear so much about equity and adequacy. My first topic talked about adequacy. My second topic talked about equity. Before I sign off, Madam Chair, I just would like to come back. I don't have prepared remarks on it, but earlier Mr. LaFleche talked about special ed tuition costs. For Millbury, if you look at the allocation in the foundation formula for special ed tuition costs, and you add circuit breaker reimbursement, which we're very pleased has increased over the last few years. Circuit breaker has really helped, and there's been an effort there. But if you combine the allocation and circuit breaker, it only reaches 60% of what we spend in special ed tuition costs. I want to say good luck with your hearings. We look forward to your findings, and I thank you for your time.
Go ahead, John.
Rick, you mentioned health insurance and the $4 million cost, well above foundation. What percentage does the district pay versus the employees?
The employee pays 25%, and the district pays 75%. And when I got to Millbury 6 years ago, it was an 80-20 split, so we've worked on that.
And what, how do you procure your insurance? You were mentioning you made a lot of changes.
Yeah, when we started, we had 3 vendors about 6 years ago. So we went to one provider a few years ago, which saved us money because everything was in one basket, so to speak. But right now, we have an insurance consultant, and he bids it out pretty much every year between all the providers in Worcester County area.
And would you say your plan is a lot richer than GIC?
I'd say it's slightly richer than GIC.
Health insurance and its impact, that because it's included for Millbury, it drives you significantly higher in net school spending. For what it's worth anecdotally, being from a municipal district, I know there's the tension, if you will, between the school budget and the town side in the budget process. Does that come out at all from the standpoint of looking at your statistics and where Millbury sits relative to foundation budget versus other neighboring districts, specifically because of retiree health insurance?
It does, Madam Chair, it does. And what happens is a lot of times, especially, and I know we have Finance Committee members here, a lot of the Finance Committee members will look at net school spending compared to other districts. And our Finance Committee members in Millbury have done due diligence and done just that. But I've always emphasized when they look at that, there's a big difference because some of our neighbors don't have the retirees' health insurance costs in there. So as I said, that's a big swing. For us, it's 6%. For another district, it might be even larger than that. So when you're looking comparison purposes on the website for net school spending, that's where we find a lot. The townspeople will take a look at that, see how much over net school spending we're spending when it might be skewed because of that.
Thank you again for your testimony. I've been remiss in noting that Representative McKenna is with us. Did you wish to testify, Representative?
Not at this point. I'm just happy to take part in the conversation. I'm thrilled that you guys came out to hear from the public. So thank you very much for taking part.
Thank you for welcoming us. That brings us then to Tyler Keenan. And then after Tyler is Joseph, I'm sorry if I butcher this, Marushek from, what's that? Close enough. Close enough, okay, thank you. And if I can just remind folks of the 3-minute request, we're gonna, I think, definitely be running over the scheduled end time of the hearing. So please try and be considerate of folks coming behind you in the order.
All right, good afternoon, Chairwoman Peisch, Chairwoman Shane Diaz, members of the Foundation Budget Review Commission. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the commission today. My name is Tyler Keenan. I'm here on behalf of the Leicester School Committee, of which I'm the vice chair. I'm also a Leicester High School graduate from the class of 2012. So to begin my testimony, I'd like to just illustrate briefly how dependent on state aid, Chapter 70 in particular, Massachusetts communities such as Leicester have become. Since Proposition 2.5 went into effect in 1982, 22, roughly, of the 32 intermittent years have had an average inflation rate higher than the 2.5% allotted by Proposition 2.5. Put another way, the Massachusetts municipalities have seen a nominal increase in their budgets each year, but they've experienced a real decline in spending power since 1982. As such, it's not uncommon for communities such as Leicester to get 60% or more of their budget in the form of state aid. Override votes are frequent, with significantly less than half succeeding. So I'd like to briefly address the underlying assumption first for out-of-district tuitions for special education students, which is determined for 2015 to be an assumption of $23,552 per pupil. In Leicester, this assumption is lower than even our least expensive day program, which costs roughly $25,000 per pupil. And at the high end, tuitions can be as high as $160,000 or more for students in residential programs. As these types of programs are free to increase their tuitions as they see fit, rate increases tied solely with inflation are simply not enough to account for the true costs of these programs. A more accurate indicator would be the median rate increases for these types of programs across the state, which would much more effectively capture the true cost increases of sending students to these very necessary programs. Additionally, a major underlying assumption made by the foundation budget formula is that a district with fewer students should be able to operate with fewer teachers, which is not always the case. In order to provide a comprehensive course offering, particularly the high school level, districts like Leicester have lower teacher-to-student ratios, which could be interpreted by some as wasteful spending. However, I'm absolutely certain that had I not been given the opportunity to take AP Statistics at Leicester High School, a course which generally does not even reach 20 students, I would not be pursuing a career in statistics at WPI and would likely still be trying to figure out what to do for the rest of my life. As a student, I was grateful for this opportunity. Now, as a school district leader, I'm committed to providing this same opportunity to those that will follow me as Leicester High alumni, and I know that the people at this table are as well. To address these issues, which are not always apparent on the surface, the foundation budget formula should take into account the size of a district and the challenges faced by smaller districts versus those faced by larger districts. The foundation budget formula is nothing more than a statistical model to predict what it should cost to run a school district. And if there's one thing I've learned as a stats major, it's that the worst thing you can have is a model that's overfit, i.e., a model that might work today, but has significant underlying flaws that will cause severe miscalculations down the road. In a system as large and complex as Massachusetts public education, this is almost a guarantee. When you go to make your recommendation, I hope you'll take into account past spending by municipalities into the formula. Look at what districts are actually spending year to year, not just what their foundation budgets were. We might never know what drives smaller districts to consistently spend more than the foundation budget, but just because we can't accurately quantify this phenomenon, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Thank you.
Tyler, I'll kick off by just saying I think that investment in that AP statistics course is paying off well for the community of Leicester. Questions from the committee?
I just want to make sure
Anybody?
that, thank you, Tyler, for coming, and it's very inspiring every time we listen to you talk. Could we make sure that we have a copy of that?
Yep, I'll forward it.
Thank you.
Email. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, that brings us to Mr. Marouche. Hopefully you'll tell us how to say it right.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, to the entire commission. My name is Joe Maruschek. I know all those crazy consonants mixed together. I'm the proud superintendent of the Mendon-Upton Regional School District. I'd like to thank all of you for the opportunity to share the very real challenges that smaller districts have been touching upon. Like the entire Commonwealth, we have much to be proud of in the 2,400 student regional school district. Student outcomes have never been higher when you're looking at traditional outcomes such as MCAS proficiency rates, AP scores, SAT scores, and so on. But we're also proud of significant gains we've made in other programs, such as a formal STEM Scholars Program and a partnership through WPI, and our one-to-one learning program at the middle and high schools, where technology is seamlessly integrated into all content areas. Despite these and many accomplishments, I have a constant fear, and that constant fear is we won't be able to keep up. I'd like to touch upon the $25 per student increase in Chapter 70 that my district has realized in each of the last 3 fiscal years. For my district, this is translated into approximately $59,000 in additional state funding per year. As I'm sure many have told you, this paltry sum does not even come close to covering maintaining level services in our operational budget. In fact, it doesn't even cover the cost of an average tuition of an out-of-district placement, which for my 34 students this year is $61,228. These are monies that I cannot spend in other critical areas, such as enhanced support in elementary literacy and mathematics through coaches to support all kids, not just those with disabilities. So if I had any wish for significant changes to the state's funding formula, it would be in the areas of special education funding, transportation, and technology. These are critical areas where I truly feel the promise is not being kept. My district is presently trying to compensate for a recent 9C cut to the regional transportation reimbursement line, one that represents a potential loss of $297,000. This cut has hamstrung us not only for the current year, but also for our FY16 budget planning, starting us in a deficit. While the regional transportation reimbursement is a great incentive for regional school districts, it only covers a fraction of our overall expenses for transportation. For the current school year, my district has $2,051,600 budgeted for transportation. And of this total, $712,400, or 35% of it, is for the transportation of our out-of-district placed students. Like other districts, we strive to share travel expenses with neighboring districts throughout our collaboratives. However, the reality is that we are in a fairly remote location, and our placements are largely within the Worcester area or in Metro West communities such as Framingham. Thus, the expenses tend to escalate rapidly. I'd also like to touch upon a topic for which I have a great deal of passion: the skillful use of technology to improve teaching and learning. My district has made a tremendous investment in technology. This year alone, we have invested a hair under $1 million, $987,000 for staffing, hardware, and network infrastructure to support technology integration. This translates to approximately $410 per student this year. I am very, very proud that we are well-positioned to take on key state initiatives such as the Park Assessment and educator evaluation, where technology use is really a non-negotiable. More importantly, we are doing our best to do what we should be doing, equipping our kids with the skills that they need to be successful in college and beyond in a 21st century economy. I believe all districts should be doing this, and I ask the Review Commission to consider a reasonable per-pupil investment in the formula expressly for technology. Last, I'd like to stress the composition of many of our smaller districts. The tax base of Mendon and Upton are respectively 93% and 97% residential. Much of Mendon is rural in nature. While on paper some of our residents may be land-rich, the reality is many are on fixed incomes and many are seniors. There is a distinct limit to the tax capacity of my communities. However, the overwhelming majority of any reasonable annual increase into the school budget falls to the towns. With any alteration to the foundation budget formula, the cycle of necessary overrides every 3 to 5 years just to fund level services will no doubt continue. For my two communities for FY16, we're looking at approximately $1 million override to be put forward to the voters this coming spring. So again, thank you for the opportunity to testify with my district's perspective, and I wish all of you well in your very important task.
Superintendent, questions? Pat?
I'd like to ask you about, apparently you know a lot about technology, and you've made a major investment this year, which I assume won't be necessary every year, but you said there should be a greater allocation in the foundation budget for technology. Do you have any data or suggestions about what you would think would be an appropriate amount across the state, given what you said about?
Well, really, the only data that I could speak to, Senator, is within our district, $400 per student this year. I think some of that is a one-time expense. We are a one-to-one iPad district. In getting the program off the ground, we've kind of had a hybrid model where there's been a parent contribution. We're shifting that to a district-owned model for obvious equity issues and so on. So some of it right now is one-time expenses, but as you know, as technology advances, there's a very, very short cycle to upgrading the actual hardware and the network infrastructure.
Quick follow-up to that, on the technology question, it's a great question, Senator Jalen, thank you for asking it. I wonder if, I'm going to look to David, for MASBO, or I wonder, Superintendent, if you might be in touch with your colleague superintendents. The issue of technology costs is a very constant theme across our meetings and hearings. And I think we are going to, soon enough be confronted with the question of if we are going to recommend, some additional component in the foundation budget, what should the number be? So any, aggregate data and recommendations that either group could offer to us about what's that right number for, sort of ongoing maintenance and updating would be very helpful in our future deliberations.
And I think I also serve as the chair of the Blackstone Valley Consortium, so I'd be happy to bring that back to our group. I think right now we're in very different places as far as what we're doing with technology, and I think the reticence of my colleagues across the state is clearly the cost implications and the whole sustainability piece.
In your conversations with colleagues, if I could just make a special ask to encourage folks to break out for us the sort of large spike, capital investments versus the ongoing maintenance and updating. Absolutely. Thank you.
Did I hear you correctly? Did you say that the cost of transportation of your special needs placement students was more than the tuition?
No. The total for this year is $712,400. No, that's the transportation.
Special needs?
Correct. For out-of-district placements.
Yeah, okay. What did you say the cost was for their tuition?
It came out to be an average of $61,828
That's the
for
average,
30
okay.
out-of-district placements.
Now, when there's reimbursement, is there reimbursement for transportation as well as for tuition? There's no reimbursement for transportation?
The regional transportation reimbursement is only for regular education transportation.
Over and above?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, did you have a question? No? Okay. Thank you very much again, Superintendent. Next up, we have Adam Gaudet from the town of Spencer. The next person on the list after Mr. Gaudet is Jim Russell from the Telegram and Gazette. I suspect, Jim, if you're still here, that maybe you were just signing in to note that you were here rather than to offer testimony. But if you're still here and you do wish to offer testimony, then you would be the next step. And after that would be Melinda Boone.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Gaudet. I'm a town administrator in the town of Spencer. We are part of 2 regional school districts, one being Spencer East Brookfield and the second being Southern Worcester County Vocational. I have a packet of information that I'll leave after. In the spirit of time, I'll keep it to 10 bullet points. On behalf of the town of Spencer, I'd like to thank you for allowing cities and towns to provide testimony today as you begin your review of the foundation budget. As town officials, we believe the concept of establishing a foundation budget for each community is definitely well intended. However, the mandate to meet the minimum local contribution, or MLC, through the municipal revenue growth factor and the target share shift is devastating municipal services in multiple communities, including ours in Spencer. For starters, the mandate is taking up most, if not all, of our new revenue on an annual basis. In FY15, the MLC increase was 120% of our 2.5 additional levy. Our increase was 5.66% this year for minimum local contribution. As you know, we're dealing with Proposition 2.5 restrictions. In addition, the municipal revenue growth factor is not factoring in that we still have not yet recovered from the economic downturn that began at the end of 2008. Our local receipts, even though we had a modest increase last year of $116,000, that's still $459,000 or 18% less than where we were in 2008. This is the same for local aid. In local aid, our local aid in 2008 was around $2.8 million. Last year it was $2.2 million. We had a modest increase of $133,000. That's still 22% below where we were in 2008. The town has done everything possible to maintain our municipal services while dealing with municipal minimum local contribution increases at the same time while dealing with the loss of revenue. We've increased all of our employees on the town side, our health insurance contribution rate to 40%. When I first came in several years ago, it was an 80-20 contribution rate. Every employee on the town side pays 40%. We increased our employee health plan designs. We eliminated 6 part-time positions at Town Hall. We reduced department heads, full-time department heads such as the town planner, the building inspector, and the town accountant from full-time to part-time. We closed our town hall 1 day a week in 2009. We asked employees to take wage freezes in 2010, 2011, and 2012. This past year, we were unable to sustain ourselves any longer. We asked voters to increase the allowable tax levy in both FY14 and FY15 just in order to maintain our municipal services. We asked for 5 overrides in 18 months. All failed. We asked for 3 for school funding, and we asked for 2 for municipal services. Our voters have clearly stated they no longer have the capacity, or currently don't have the capacity, to pay any more taxes. Thus, on July 1st this year, we were forced to eliminate 7 positions and cut hours by 25% at our town library. One of those 7 positions, the lady had worked in town for 40 years. Another had worked in town for 28 years. We closed our town hall a second day per week. We are now only open Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. All of our support staff thus had to take a 25% cut. We eliminated our Parks and Recreation program, closed our town beach, reduced salaries at the police department and fire department. We eliminated a highway department staff position, and we reduced desperately needed road maintenance funding. The municipal revenue growth factor and the requirement to shift towns to meet their target share is not only resulting in loss of services at the town level, it's eliminating jobs. The municipal revenue growth factor is applied to the MLC regardless of the fact that we need to provide other services such as plow and fix the streets, staff necessary public safety positions, operate our finance departments at Town Hall, and even offer cultural and recreation opportunities for seniors, youth, and other citizens in our town. We are making a plea to the Commission to not only look at the foundation budget, but also address this unintended consequence that the foundation budget has had on our community and others. We are forced to request for overrides every year just to maintain municipal services due to our MLC mandates. One possible suggestion for solution is to cap the MLC increase, including the target share shift, to the percentage of the allotted annual 2.5% tax levy increase that matches the percentage of the general fund budget that goes to meet the local contribution. Unfortunately, the requirement to fund mandated MLC levels has resulted in the town of Spencer's and many other communities' inability to maintain municipal services, and if this mandate continues without severe alteration, the town of Spencer will offer education and little, if anything, else. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? I just want to make sure I understood one of your last suggestions there. You were suggesting to have the required local contribution mirror the percent, I assume the state level, something percentage. Yeah, if you can just say that, restate that.
So, for example, if the MLC contribution represents 50% from the previous year's total budget for the town, then the amount of the MLC increase for the upcoming year would match that percentage or be 50% of the new available levy. That leaves some levy left for us to fund our other services. As I said, this year we had 120% of our levy go to education. That meant we had a cut right off the bat before we addressed anything in our municipal budget. Our minimum local contribution last year was $345,000, and our new levy was only $287,000.
See no other questions. Thank you again for being here today. Jim Russell still here, wishing to testify? I'm going to take that as a no. All right, so that brings us to Superintendent Boone from Worcester. Welcome, Superintendent.
Good afternoon. And before I start my remarks, I know you've had questions. There are three of us presenting this morning, along with myself, School Committee Member Tracy O'Connell-Novick, and Mayor Joe Petty. So some of your questions may be answered in the way in which we've structured our remarks. So you may, if I could respectfully suggest, wait till all three of us, and then we can answer any questions you may have. Okay, thank you. Senator Chang Diaz, Representative Paish, and commission members. I'm Melinda Boone, Superintendent of the Worcester Public Schools, the third largest district in the Commonwealth. We are a district that is funded at or near the foundation budget level each year. We all too well know how certain areas of the foundation budget have impacted our overall financial ability to provide opportunities for all students. The basic premise of the foundation budget formula, a differentiated per pupil allocation that recognizes additional funds for ESL and low-income funds, is not perfect, but it is a formula that has proven to work and is easily understandable. After 22 years with little updates, the formula needs to reflect changes during the past 2 decades. Average class size and primary grades, the amount used for teacher salaries, the amounts for both ESL and low-income increments, all for sure deserve some level of consideration by the Commission. But clearly, both the assumed full-time equivalency and per pupil dollar amount for special education, as well as the amount provided for fringe benefits, are the two areas that are significantly far below what is adequate in the formula. And I say this after years of reforms, cost savings, and other initiatives in these areas. The foundation budget assumes a full-time equivalency of 3.75% of students receive in-district special education services, and 1% of students are serviced through out-of-district placements. In Worcester, while 18% of our students receive some level of in-district service, on a full-time equivalency, that equates to 7.9% of our enrollment. Similarly, 2.3% of our enrollment are receiving services through out-of-district placements. Even when you take out circuit breaker reimbursement, we spend $32 million more on special education than the foundation provides. The foundation budget covers 47% of the actual cost of special education. Similarly, our school committee and employee unions have agreed to several health insurance changes over the past several years. Contribution rates have changed, co-pays and deductibles have changed, and our analysis shows that Worcester plans are more cost-efficient than the state's GIC plans. We've done what the state said we should do on health insurance, and we still are spending $25 million more in health insurance and fixed costs than the foundation budget provides. When you're faced with increased special education and health insurance costs and no change in the foundation budget formula, you're required to be innovative in order to allocate revenues that support student achievement. The Worcester School Committee has adopted a 7-point financial plan for advancing student achievement and program sustainability. This plan is our financial compass to ensure that meeting the needs of our students remains the highest priority of all budget decisions. We engage in long-term budget planning, use a zero-based budget review of spending, have a highly transparent budget and budget process, have frequent financial updates to the community, develop programs using funds that are both supplemental and sustainable, cap administrative spending at 1.5% of the district's foundation budget, and target all new revenues in very prescriptive ways. We've invested resources to develop internal capacity to deliver special education programs in district savings, creating savings of $3.5 million from out-of-district and third-party contracted services. We've renegotiated energy contracts and restructured energy management services. We've consolidated, reduced, and redefined non-classroom positions, and we've even moved all employee pay stubs online, saving $65,000 in annual postage costs. There isn't one area of the budget that we haven't looked at to squeeze as much as we can into instructional services. We're innovating and consolidating, but there's only so much that can be done without impacting students. We cannot continue with this vast underfunding of these two areas of the foundation budget. Thank you.
Before you go, we're going to hold questions, but if I could just ask if you haven't already, to make sure that you provide a written copy of your statement. Great, thank you. Our greatest social media promoter, Superintendent Novick.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
My name is Tracy O'Connell-Novick. I'm a 3-term member of the Worcester School Committee. Among the things that you have asked to see are measures to ensure effective resource allocation, as well as models of effective and efficient allocation. It's that which I'll address today. To ensure effective resource allocation, every district must have a transparent and easy to understand budget process and document. Any member of the public should be able to find and use a district's budget document, and it should take no special training to understand it. Every dollar and every dime should be accounted for in it. A 10-minute PowerPoint or a handful of spreadsheet pages is not a budget. Such presentations only hinder the effective allocation by the school committee. They also impede the ability of the public to ensure that it is such. I suspect that this is outside your purview. However, it is something that MASBO, MASC, and MASS together can work on to improve in districts across the state. And it's also the most effective means to that end. I would note, by the way, that the Worcester Public Schools have again this year received the Meritorious Budget Award from the Association of School Business Officials International. I would thus suggest that our budget is one that you could look to. In the interest of looking for effective and efficient allocation, I went back through 13 years of Worcester Public School budget. Prior to FY02, the foundation budget had been fully implemented, but it was then that we began to see double-digit health insurance increases. It is thus not a coincidence that when I compiled a full list of the cuts and other saving measures implemented during those years, I was only able to fit it on a single page by putting it into a 9-point font. Much concern has been expressed about district changes to health insurance for cost savings, as was just addressed by Dr. Boone. In Worcester, our employees in FY10 went to a 75-25 split, saving the district $3.2 million a year. In FY12, our employees, ahead of state movement on health insurance, were offered what was termed a GIC-like plan, Fallon Advantage. Through that and through mitigation to lower cost plans, the district saved $7.2 million that first year and $2.5 million the year after. Thus, in total, the district is saving $13 million a year on the full measure of those health insurance changes. And still, Madam Chairs, in Worcester, our health insurance costs are undercalculated in the foundation formula by $25 million a year. During those 13 years, the Worcester Public Schools also converted nearly all buildings from oil and from electric heating to gas, along with other energy-saving programs, saving the district $475,000 a year, implemented a district-written computer power management system to automatically shut down machines, saving the district $150,000 a year in electrical costs, updated our in-house created and managed student employee database system, saving the district $382,000 a year, brought back in-house special education programming associated with our district program for students with autism, saving the district $3.5 million a year and improving service. and was mentioned by Dr. Boone, cut printing and postage costs through electronic pay stubs, saving the district $65,000 a year. This is in addition to savings realized through every line being scrutinized every year through the district's zero-based budget system and through a transparent and public budget process. It also ensures that in every case, savings have been put back into the classroom. At the same time, however, the Worcester Public Schools also closed a total of 7 elementary schools and 1 middle school program, cut citywide preschool programs from full day to half day, cut extended day programs in 10 elementary schools, cut all elementary school librarians, cut the citywide gifted and talented program, cut world languages in all city elementary schools, cut after-school programs in 9 schools, cut 30 Head Start slots, hit a low of $30 per pupil supply spending, a level from which we're still recovering, hit a low of $200,000 citywide for technology spending, a level from which we're still recovering, went above the student-teacher ratio recommended by the foundation budget in 2005, which we're still recovering from, and cut hundreds of classroom and non-classroom positions. There are times at which it is no longer effective or efficient spending. Sometimes a cut is just a cut. The education and programs we were able to provide in 2000 were much closer to that which we should be offering our children in class sizes, in course offerings, in after-school programs, in support services, in supplies and technology across the board. But we start each budget year with at least a $70 million gap due to inflation, special education, and health insurance alone. We are not in Worcester giving our children the education they deserve, nor are we giving them the education envisioned by the foundation budget. The state constitution marks it as the duty of legislators and magistrates in all future periods of this Commonwealth to cherish the public and grammar schools of the town. It is necessary, John Adams wrote, for the preservation of our rights and liberties. We urgently need action.
Thank you, Tracy. This brings us to the mayor. You have quite a trifecta here from Worcester.
I want to thank the commission for coming out on these Saturdays and listening, because education is very important. As you know, I'm the mayor of the city of Worcester, and as chair of the city council and chair of the Worcester School Committee, I see firsthand the difficult choices the city of Worcester and the Worcester Public Schools have to make in order to balance the budget each year. The foundation budget is intended to provide an adequate level of funding and minimum spending level for each community. When your choices are between small classes and school nurses, it's not an adequate budget. When your choices are between guidance counselors and kindergarten assistants, it's not an adequate budget. When your choices are between building maintenance and computers, it's not an adequate budget. School district, municipal, and state budgets should be a little hard to balance. That's our job at the municipal level, and good decisions and cost-saving measures can occur when the budget is just as little difficult. We see that in Worcester, but it should be a little bit easier. With all the hard work and planning done by administration, both the city and the schools, our city council and our school committee, the needs for a district are recognized by the foundation budget. To take a single example, on average, our fixed costs increase by 3% each year. The inflation factor really is as high as the actual increase in the fixed costs. Despite areas that we've neglected, we have a great school system in the city of Worcester. Our graduates attend the very best colleges in the country. We have a nationally recognized technical high school. We offer full-day kindergarten to all our students. We have a kindergarten through 12th grade fine arts magnet programs that send students to national and international programs. We have demonstrated that we can raise a school from a level 4 to level 1 status through using time and resources correctly. We have a program for autistic students so recognized that families move to Worcester to have their children attended. We have nearly 200 students in elementary dual language programs, and I'm proud to say that we educate all our kids, whatever their abilities and whatever their needs. However, in Worcester and in the Commonwealth, we need a world-class system for all students so they can compete in science, technology, math, fine arts, world languages, and humanities. This isn't cheap, but providing for the future of Worcester and of Massachusetts is the most important investment we can make. The Mass Budget and the Policy Center report, Cutting Class, shows that the lowest 20% of wealth districts in the state spend 32% less on regular education teachers than the foundation budget allows. 32% less on teachers in those communities that can least afford to spend less on teachers. When you can barely spend that foundation, there are no other choices. We need more highly trained teachers to work with our students, not less of them. Our achievement gap is tied to the opportunity gap that the current foundation budget is creating. We have demonstrated that we spend the resources that we have efficiently. We need the foundation budget to reflect the resources to make it support our district. In your hearings around the state, you have heard from urban and suburban districts, regional districts, and municipal districts. They're all telling you the same thing: the foundation budget is broken and needs to be updated. We will soon begin our third generation that will attend schools under the foundation budget formula, and we need to fix the foundation budget formula now. And I'm just going to put some written testimony that summarizes us three, along with City Manager Ed Augustus, Superintendent Boone, and myself. We all each signed a letter on how we're working cooperatively as a community. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Questions from the committee members?
I would just
Joe?
ask about enrollment again. How's enrollment moved in Worcester over the last few years?
School committee member Tracy O'Connell-Novick mentioned that we had closed 7 or 8 schools in that time. Our enrollment has increased. One of the reasons we were successful in coming through the recession is that we had enrollment increases during that time. We're up nearly 500 students for a fiscal year, this school year. So we keep knocking on Springfield's door to be the second largest school district in Massachusetts. But we have seen enrollment increases at a time prior when we had closed facilities. And now we are really struggling with space in our schools also.
A little bit of additional on that, to follow on. The profile of those increases, more low income, same?
Public schools has seen a shift. Not just in the last 5 to 7 or 8 years, but over the last 20 years in terms of the demographics. Our number of students who are English language learners has increased. About a quarter of our students are English language learner program students. About 40% of our students are English as a second language. We're run on average about 73% of our students are eligible for free and reduced price lunch. That is a shift.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman, the first is maybe more of a statement, although welcome you to treat it as a question and follow up if you would. One of the charges of our commission is to make recommendations regarding cost savings, and it's one of the least addressed charges in the testimony that we've had throughout the hearings to date, and it's refreshing to hear it mentioned in your testimony. And I guess the statement is, I know as a member of MASBO, that I think unfairly I view this charge of looking for cost savings as if it was a novel concept, that maybe districts could find more money if they'd only look for ways to save the money that they currently have. And so you've talked about cost savings measures, and I will attest that one of the things that my organization does is recognize districts through an award program for cost efficiencies, and I can leave it at that statement unless you wish to embellish upon the extent to which you've actively sought cost savings measures in your district.
I had the fortunate opportunity to become superintendent at a very difficult economic time with the global recession. And so it gave me an opportunity to do 2 things. One, come in with an idea of zero-based budgeting so that I could figure out where every dime was being spent in the district. And that was supported and embraced by the best CFO in the Commonwealth, Brian Allen. And as a result of that, that also became our mechanism to survive the recession. And so it is easy for educators to say, I need more, but not talk about what differences they've made. It was clear that through the recession, we were going to have to create our new bottom line, our new normal. And so in order to do that and to be clear to say to the city that we are not coming just asking for more money because we think we're entitled to it, but we've also approached our school district in terms of its finances using a very strong business model to recognize that there are places that we have to go and find efficiencies and to operate more effectively. And we've done that from everything, as we said, the development and the recommendation to the school committee of the 7-point financial plan became our tool to codify practices we had used throughout the recession and that we had seen a great deal of benefit from. And so we've looked at everything, working closely with the city on energy management contracts, things that we have done ourselves within the district. We intentionally, through the 7-point financial plan, cap the administrative spending. Even in our own community, within members of our own school committee, there's always this idea that we are so top-heavy, and yet I listened to my colleagues today talk about central offices that are strapped, and how can we support curriculum work if we don't have anyone doing it? And who have that release, those persons who have that release time to do that. And so we've been very intentional, the places that we go to align ourselves. We can talk about health insurance because we've made changes in health insurance. And gone is the message for us in Worcester that we need to realign our contributions, our plan design, and the plans that we have available. We've done that. Our unions have embraced that. At the same time, during the recession, they also took zeros. And so we've come together through a lot of times to create a compelling story and a compelling picture of the business model that we've applied to our educational process with the student. Every decision is about the student in the center, and what do we need to make sure our students have the best opportunity. But we've done those efficiencies, and we've done those recycling projects, and we're at a point now, without some relief through the foundation budget process, we don't have many opportunities left.
Superintendent Boone, this is a bit rhetorical, but I know you can handle this question, all right? So what I've heard in your testimony is you're spending at foundation, yet you're spending $25 million more in health insurance than the foundation budget allows. So you're at foundation, notwithstanding overspending by $25 million, which could have been used, obviously, toward educational purposes. And yet you have an award-winning vocational school at which the president came to speak at its commencement, and notable achievements throughout the district. How do you then counter the claim by some, well, isn't that good enough for an urban district, for the third largest district in Massachusetts, one of the largest in New England? You're spending at foundation budget. Aren't our outcomes good enough?
The short answer is absolutely not. Those outcomes are not good enough, because even as we've moved our graduation rates since 2006 to 79.2% of our students graduated in 4 years, we're knocking on the door of the state's overall rating. Until all of our students are graduating, there's still work to be done. I have high schools where students have 2 or more study halls in their schedules because we don't have enough money to create new elective positions to support meaningful work around that. Throughout all of this work, we've also raised our graduation requirements to match those of the Mass Core so that our students won't have any challenges in competing for those quality universities and colleges that the mayor mentioned. And so we don't have full-day pre-K. We don't have extended learning time where we would like to have it. We don't have enough opportunities. Yes, we preserved athletics and the arts, because one of the things I think nationally we tend to do is think because we're in an urban district and we have tough economic times, we take out those things that all students should have in terms of arts and athletics. I refuse to do that as a superintendent, but there are costs associated with that, and so those are those places where we find ourselves now.
Superintendent, I think one of your colleagues mentioned taking level 4 schools, bringing them to level 1. Can you give us a sense as to the kind of costs that might be incurred trying to do that, and where do they fit into the foundation, or is the foundation need to address that better?
I would think the foundation really does need to address the state's new accountability system for schools. That was not in place 20-plus years ago when the foundation budget was established. We have been fortunate that throughout the time of this new accountability system, we've only had 4 schools that have been identified as level 4. 2 have now exited level 4 status. The 4th was just named this year. And so we have tapped into the federal dollars and the state dollars for school redesign grants to support that work. But we've also very strategically looked at how we've invested those dollars to support that turnaround in our recommendations to the school committee, because we know that those funds are short-term. And so we didn't buy major programs to do the work. We haven't invested in a lot of personnel with those dollars. We have invested in the professional development, because that's capacity that stays with us once the school turns itself around with those teachers and leaders. And we've invested in the time. As we've dealt with 2 schools now who have exited level 4 status, we've reviewed to see what are the key levers for success with those schools and what are the things we need to maintain through that 2-year assurance period and beyond. And time is one of those. Even though we don't subscribe to the full extended learning time model through the grant with the Time Collaborative, we've shown other flexible ways to use the time and have made adjustments, but preserving 30 minutes a day common planning time for teachers in those schools and an extra hour of instructional time to build in the resources and supports in the day. So we're still maintaining. Those funds, once those opportunities are where we're tapping in now into our local funds, into our federal dollars, which are also declining, as you probably heard throughout these hearings. Federal dollars have been declining at the same rate, and so we're pushing the envelope in how we support that work. For example, our wraparound coordinators for level 4 schools have been funded through either school redesign or Race to the Top funds. We made a commitment for this current fiscal year using a combination of federal grants to continue them for this year. As we build our budget going for FY16, we see them as a significant piece of the work, but not addressed anywhere in the foundation budget.
And just one follow-up, if you, do you feel if you're not able to keep that extra time, you run the risk of falling back?
To use an analogy that I truly, truly hate, but I think about welfare reform, we would tell people who were receiving public assistance that you have to go to work, and as soon as they go to work, you pull the assistance. And yet there are entry-level jobs where childcare and other supports, that bridge is needed to ensure that success. So I think, when I think about what needs to happen to continue to support schools that have turned themselves around and the supports that are needed to ensure that other schools don't become in need of that significant turnaround, that we have to figure out how do we sustain the resources and the supports for those schools in a longer bridge, and not just the minute you exit, you're done.
I wanted to follow up on David's point from earlier, and just, I guess it's also a statement rather than a question, but to really thank you for your focus on the efficiencies that you have sought to make, and it really drew out for me something that I think has been true across testimony that we've heard from other districts that I hadn't quite realized yet, which is we have not heard as explicitly from most of the testifiers about that charge that we're charged with of expounding on models for efficient and effective spending, use of resources. But I think, in fact, testimony about that charge has been unwittingly or wittingly woven into testimony from districts under the heading of, we've done everything we can already to find savings, and now, we're cutting into bone. So I thank you for sort of, jogging our thinking a little bit, and to perhaps look back at some of that testimony and see if it does speak to that otherwise underrepresented charge in our work. A couple quick, just more technical questions. I forget whose testimony it was. I think it was yours, Dr. Boone, mentioned about the shortfalls in the category of special education funding. It might have been yours, Tracy. But I'm wondering what the percentage is of your total special ed costs in and out of district together that is not covered by a combination of the foundation budget allotment and circuit breaker.
The foundation budget only covers 47% of the actual special ed costs. So we do get federal IDEA dollars, but again, IDEA dollars are designed to go above and beyond what the base should be, not to supplant the base. And the way in which we're having to support special education in Massachusetts is that IDEA is becoming that gap filler.
7% figure for your in-district special ed, or your total in and out of district together? So if you layer on top of that 47%, whatever you're getting on circuit breaker dollars, I would imagine it reduces that number.
And I'm gonna,
or maybe it increases
there he
the
is,
number,
there's Brian Allen. I carry a lot of numbers, but he carries a few more
Totally
than I do.
understandable, totally understandable. And if nobody knows off the top of their head, that's totally understandable. You could follow up.
We spend about $60 million in special education, and we receive about $32 million between foundation and circuit breaker.
Okay, thank you. Very succinct, impressive. Also, a question that is in follow-up to something that we've heard from many of the previous hearings. You guys didn't touch on it, but I'm wondering if you can opine, which is this issue of transience of student population and the impact that it has on school districts when your enrollment number is, captured on October 1st, but then you see a lot of change in your enrollment after that October 1st date. So we've been asking people for suggestions about, is there a second date sometime in the year? What date would you ask for if you could choose a second date for us to do an adjustment?
Hailing from a state that had two enrollment target dates, prior to my being superintendent here in Worcester, in Virginia, we looked at September 30th and March 30th. Because that was a way to begin to make some adjustments in terms of what happened as you think about the next fiscal year. Obviously, the budget cycle process at the state level is different, and at the state and local level, but again, those were two dates that we knew that our October 1st numbers would be the major driver of building a budget for the next fiscal year, but that the March 30th numbers would also begin to reflect adjustments that may need to be made at some point, either at the beginning of the fiscal year or midpoint of the next fiscal year.
Is it?
March 30th, okay. Yes.
May I follow up on this question?
Sure.
So in the other state, was it in Georgia? Virginia. What did they do with the data in March in that same, I don't know if you had the same fiscal year that we do here, but in other words, you had an October 1st date or a September 30th date, and that kind of gave you the insight as to what the majority of your population was. Were there any adjustments to your current year budget with those March numbers?
Sometimes if there were dollars that could be reallocated, those would come in. But usually it would be used to make adjustments in the next fiscal year. So we would base our budget on the October 1 numbers, September 30th, October 1 numbers for the following budget. We knew that those were the core numbers, but the state used the March 30th numbers to look at any other adjustments. The state budget cycle in Virginia, by now, districts have to have their budget submitted to their cities and towns by April 1st. And so the General Assembly is not full-time General Assembly, so they are done by the middle of March in terms of knowing what the revenue projections will be and what the governor's budget and all of that. And so the cycle is somewhat different. But again, they do enrollment snapshots twice a year.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was really interested in your comparison of turnaround schools to reform.
I hate that, by the way, but it's the best one that most people understand.
Because I have been thinking about the fact that we do identify the poorest schools in our Commonwealth, say they need reform, give them money for 3 years, and then they're expected to continue. So I wonder if there's anything we can learn from those experiences about what it really costs to educate poor children, because many people have testified before this committee about the how much the adjustment, not how much it should be, but that there should be more recognition of the problems poor children bring to school. So can we, and you don't have to answer it right now, but what can we learn from how people spend their money in turnaround schools, how much it costs, and what you're having to do to continue that progress?
One editorial comment and one factual comment. I think, again, the perception that schools that are underperforming are always poor schools, I think, is a stretch in that thinking. That's something that we've tended to bring to the table. There are struggling schools across this Commonwealth regardless. The volume in terms of what we have in urban districts with large numbers, therefore it looks like it is. But if you drill down into numbers in some of our smaller districts and see who's not being successful, you see a combination of affluence and non-affluence there. The state has done, I think, a really great job, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, of capturing the practices and how the monies have been aligned and allocated for turnaround schools. And so I would say to the commission, looking at those reports on best practices in turnaround, we now have several years of data. 2010 represented the first year of the turnaround schools in the Commonwealth. And so in that first year, you talked about what were the practices and the things that were going on. Now that we've gotten into our second set of schools eligible for exiting level 4 status, we now have the information about where dollars were aligned with those turnaround plans and what's showing up in the assurance plans and how those are being funded. So I think there are some real clear data points to support that.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much to this Worcester delegation. We have another testifier from Worcester, Brian Lewis. And then after Mr. Lewis, John Richard from the city of Leominster. And then after that, we have Paul Murphy, who I believe Paul Murphy is the last person we have signed up to testify. If there's anyone else who wishes to testify who has not signed up yet, if you could please make yourself known, or, is our sheet still on the table out there? Okay. We'll do one last call, but so far that's all we've done. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you to the Commission for this opportunity to speak. I'm Brian Lewis. I'm a faculty member at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. I am also an associate dean within the Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences at that institution. I'm a resident of Worcester and the parent of 2 young children in public schools. I should emphasize that I'm not speaking on behalf of the university leadership today. I'm speaking as an individual. Because you've heard so much from our school district leadership and our school committee, I will greatly abbreviate my comments. I did want to emphasize 2 things. One, the University of Massachusetts Medical School is very committed to having a very robust and diverse workforce. And individually, I would argue that this is necessary for the success of that medical school. If the Worcester Public Schools and its regional partners in neighboring towns do not have the resources to appropriately educate and train its students, we will not be able to meet the workforce needs of the medical school or other academic health sciences centers, biotech, et cetera, that we're trying to promote in central Massachusetts. Secondly, I would like to, as Mr. Cohen, I think he may have left, who's a fellow parent in the Worcester Public Schools, has mentioned, and Tracy O'Connell-Novick highlighted for you, if our public schools do not have the resources for simple things such as supplies, paper for the copy machine, if they can only have one photocopier that occasionally breaks and therefore there's nothing to utilize, we cannot expect those public schools to meet the needs of our students. My own children attend an innovation school within the Worcester Public Schools, an elementary school that has a dual language instruction program, and yet that public school frequently runs out of paper. Parents pay for supplies, very basic supplies for those classrooms. I would argue that potentially one cause of that shortfall is the way that the foundation budget is structured and its underestimation of special education costs, et cetera, English language learner associated costs that are very prevalent in urban public school districts, such as those in Worcester. And therefore, I would urge the Commission to really rethink how that budget is allocated and designed. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis, any questions from the Commission? Seeing none, I just say a special thanks to you and Mr. Cohen, who I see still here in the back. We're at pains, especially on the Commission, to make sure that word gets out to parents. We know the communication networks are a little bit more official for our school officials and faculty, so we really appreciate your time here. Thank you. Mr. Richard.
Hello, my name is John Richard. I'm the Director of Finance, City Comptroller for the City of Leominster. And I'm here today to talk about, there's a lot of things, but one thing that I think, and you've heard a lot already about, is, and I oversee it, is the group health insurance aspect of the foundation budget. Not only the group health insurance for active employees, but for their retired employees. And I'm here to talk about both retirement and OPEB. I think your whole fringe benefits section is grossly underestimates the true cost of running a school system. And therefore, I think there's great opportunities for cost savings in these areas if you do a complete revamp of the area. And let me expound on that a little bit more. For instance, I don't want to get too technical, and I do think that you should have a special committee or a special commission just on OPEB and retirement cost alone, because it is so technical. However, in the retirement and OPEB, remember there's two sections. There's the normal cost for active employees and the past costs, unfunded liabilities, of which in the retirement system, it's mostly unfunded liabilities that you're paying for. So you're paying for prior unfunded school systems or taxpayers who intergenerationally burden future taxpayers, which is a very cost-inefficient way of doing things. Okay, so the most cost-efficient way to do things is to properly fund in the year that you make the expense. And we've proven that in the retirement area. For instance, in the city of Leominster, we will be fully funded in 2022, similar to Shrewsbury, which is way ahead of most communities. Now, what does that mean? That means that the $8 million or $6 million that is going towards the unfunded liability can then be freed up to pay for other services, which every community in the Commonwealth has told Moody's, when we pay our pension, because it's a statutory obligation, we're going to pay towards OPEB. And for instance, in the city of Leominster, we have approximately 15 million of outstanding bonds. But our retirement and our OPEB unfunded liabilities total 225 million, of which only 40 million of that is retirement related. So therefore, the foundation budget grossly underestimates, especially in the OPEB side, what the true costs are. And what I'm here today to ask you is to change the formula to include, because you are offering group health insurance for retirement purposes to all your employees, but your method of paying for it right now is the most cost-inefficient way, and that's called pay-as-you-go. So if you change the funding mechanism from a pay-as-you-go formula to pay-as-incurred, similar to the retirement system, I think billions of dollars would be freed up. People may think it's more costly that way in the beginning, but in the end, it is truly, this is why GASB, FASB, everybody requires current funding of those types of benefits. In this foundation budget, because it started way back before OPEB became the big elephant in the room, currently, DESE is saying we will only allow you to use pay-as-you-go method. So the gentleman that talked about retiree health care, of the communities that selected, I think they did adopt a 4-year phase-in to allow everybody to do that. But that is the most cost-inefficient way to deal with the situation. So I would ask for you to be leaders in this cost efficiency march to start including OPEB cost in the foundation budget. Also, which will make you partners with municipalities, especially I was at a joint committee on public service in January of 14 because urban communities are drowning in debt, and specifically retirement and OPEB. It is drowning out all other services, and it will only get worse. And one of the suggestions I said is become a partner with us. by allowing the foundation budget, because in Leominster's case, you're paying 60% of the foundation, we're paying 40%, to allow you to become partners with us to address this cost prohibitive aspect. And I would also ask you to look at, currently you do subsidize retirement and retirement payments, and you do it outside of foundation budget, again, underestimating foundation budget because you fully pay for teachers' pensions. Okay, so what happens in that case, by it not being part of foundation budget, and of course you're underreporting the true cost of providing education, but also there's great differences. For instance, Leominster with 6,300 people receives an $11 million subsidy, and Lexington with 63, greater wealth, greater income, receives a $17 million subsidy. Okay, so the incentive or the reward for Leominster by holding costs down through teacher salaries or whatever, may be missing out on that. So I would ask you to look to include teachers' retirement, because remember, in teachers' retirement, there's the active in the past in that cost. So I just wanted to bring that aspect of the fringe benefits for you to become leaders in helping communities with that situation.
Yeah, go ahead. Just a comment / question. I'm sure you're aware of the fact that there was a commission that looked at changing what the health insurance benefit would be for all state municipal employees, which, assuming that that gets tackled in this session, should have some beneficial impact on what the long-term liability is on that. I appreciate that even if we were to eliminate it tomorrow, we still have this huge unfunded liability.
Yes, that should become part of this form.
So I think it's important. I appreciate your mentioning this issue here today, because while it's not within our charge to deal with the laws regarding retirement, I think this is one of those areas where there's a lack of appreciation about the impact. My understanding is on the pension side, the contributions to the pension from current employees, which was increased substantially a number of years ago, goes a long way towards current employees funding the future.
I would respectfully disagree with that. That is the mantra that is being sold by, I don't want to say unions or people who advocate for that, but the fact of the matter is that's only the case. What happens in most of the retirement systems is, and this is why it's complicated, it's dependent on the discount rate you use. For instance, I think the state teachers, because they're using 8%, it lowers the cost. But if you use the true cost, not even close to what the private sector is required to use, you would be paying a lot more. For instance, the city of Leominster's contribution is 9%, similar to the employees' 9%, because we use a truer investment rate of return. But what I think you are charged with is allowing OPEB costs for active employees to be part of the foundation budget.
You're advocating for.
Yes.
Any other questions for the committee? Seeing none, thank you again. Mr. Murphy.
Senator Chang Diaz, Representative Peisch, and members of the Joint Commission, I appreciate your taking the time to hear us. I also want to thank members of the public also for providing what I consider fairly eloquent arguments in favor of changing Chapter 70. I seem to have the unfortunate task of batting cleanup here, and I'll tell you up front, I'm no David Ortiz, so. I want to echo a lot of what has been said today. There are so many different areas that I think could use modernization. One area that I'll just let you know, I'm the member of the school committee for the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District. We submitted a letter back in January 22nd in preparation for the original meeting that was to be held here. And I just wanted to focus on one piece of the formula, and that had to do with the assumed in-district special education enrollment factor. Representative Benson was kind enough to come to a school committee meeting just last Thursday and give us a little primer on Chapter 70, in which I learned that the assumed in-district special education enrollment was actually a combination of factors, an assumed percentage enrollment, an assumed level of service to come up with a 3.75. What I would like to suggest is that rather than let those numbers be fixed assumptions, now I think the districts carry data that are sufficient to allow those numbers to be truly reflective of what the enrollment is. So that's pretty well all I had to say, other than I'd just like to ask you to be bold in modernizing education in Massachusetts. There are many examples around the Commonwealth of how posterity has showed its appreciation for bold action in adverse times, with the statues that stand in Lexington, Gloucester, Acton, and many other towns in the Commonwealth. It's your turn. Please be bold in taking this responsibility. Thank you.
Very much. And, well, let me check for questions from the commission. You see none. You may be glad to know that there's one more person who wishes to testify. So Ed Bain will now be batting cleanup from the Westboro School Finance Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Ed Bain. I'm Vice Chair of Finance Committee in Westboro, formerly Chair. Just to share a couple of numbers, we're in our process of finishing up our FY16 budgets, school budget and town budget in preparation for town meeting in 2 weeks. And just running a couple of numbers, our total budget in Westboro for schools will be $57,000, let's say $58,000. Okay, we have 3,700 children in the district. It's a full K-12 district. When you break that down per student, we're spending about $12,000, a little over $12,000 on salary and expenses, so that's our operating budget. We're paying about, per student, about $12,178 on operating. Insurance is about $2,000 per student, okay, across those 3,700 to equal about a little over $7 million. With that, we have some retirement for the custodial accounts for Worcester retirement, and then we carry debt of about $1,200 per student now for a total of $15,000. We get, through a combination both the foundation budget and then Chapter 70 distribution, just over $7 million. Basically, the only thing we get is to pay our insurance. We don't get any money for teaching, for transportation, for retirement, towards our budget. So obviously there's something wrong there. And I think a large part of it is, as somebody was saying, our OPEB. And we are including in our OPEB, or in our insurance account, 1.1 million funding of OPEB, which we've been doing for the past 2 years. Our ARC, which is our annual required contribution, is about a little over $4 million, with a total of $45 million unfunded liability. So just wanted to share that with you.
The first total that you said 58,000?
All right, our total budget is $58 million, okay? Now that's net of grants and everything else we get, okay? And we have 3,700 students.
Okay, thank you.
Senator, did you have a question? Okay, nothing. Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very
much
much.
for your testimony. Anyone else who wishes to testify? Seeing none, we will close this hearing. Thank you again, everyone, for your time and your testimony here today.